Okay. Can everybody hear me? We're going to go ahead and get started. Our clock in the room is actually a minute slow. So I will call this meeting to order herewith and ask the clerk to make sure we have quorum, please.
Councilmember Lang.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Here.
Vice Mayor Fleiger.
Here.
Mayor Daley.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, and if we can stand, if you're able to, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we did not have a closed session today, so there's nothing to report. And I will look to my colleagues to see if any of them have a change to the order of the agenda that they want to make. Okay. Now we'll take public comments on items not on the agenda. And I will just remind the audience of some of our rules around public commenting. It is acceptable to cede your time to another individual. However, the total amount of ceded time can be no more than 5 minutes, and the amount of time will depend on the amount of time that's allocated for each comment. So under some circumstances, commenters may have 3 minutes, and in that case, one person can cede time to another person, and that person would get 5 minutes, not 6. If we end up with 2 minutes for comments, then one person ceding time yields a 4-minute opportunity to speak. And you would need a third person to get to the 5 minutes at that point. So, do we have cards for comments? On the consent calendar?
If they pull it, then the comment comes later. The public comments come later.
No, well, there'll be comments on the agenda on the consent calendar.
If someone pulls something from consent,
It'll still be on the agenda. And it would be commented on under our new, these are comments, yeah.
excuse me, I apologize.
I just haven't gotten
I
as,
jumped too far ahead. My apologies.
no problem. All right, so do we have speaker cards?
Yes, the first speaker,
How many cards do we have?
actually we only have one for non-agenda items.
Okay, 3 minutes, please.
Kirsty Elder.
Hi, my name's Kirsty Elder. I've been a Los Altos resident for over 30 years. I'm a primary care physician at Stanford. I've been there for 13 years and worked at Valley Medical Center for 25. I'm here asking you to consider endorsement of Measure A, either as an individual or council-wide. Measure A is a 5-year, 5/8 of a cent sales tax. The funds will stay in the county and will not be lost to the state or the feds. It is expected to generate $330,000 yearly to help offset an expected $1 billion loss to our county due to the unprecedented cuts in the federal health care budget signed into law by our President Donald Trump. Los Altos would be impacted by the contraction of public services. Emergency rooms at El Camino and Stanford hospitals will see more patients and become more crowded. Trauma services and the first-rate burn center and rehab center that's used by everybody will likely suffer. I hope you do what you can to support our community so we don't suffer in these times of change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Elder. All right, so now we're going to go to the consent calendar. And the way we'll handle this is we'll take public comment on all of the items on the consent calendar. And if something gets pulled from the consent calendar so that we treat it separately and individually, then there will be an opportunity to make comments on that item when it comes up later on in the agenda. So do any of my colleagues want to remove anything from the consent calendar? Okay, we'll take, and how many comments do we have on the consent calendar?
One moment here. Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2.
Okay, 3 minutes each.
The first speaker is Nathan Godaris.
Hello. Not really sure how it works. This is the first time I'm coming to one of these meetings. I just noticed that there's going to be renovations of the workout center over there by the library, or over there. We all know where it is. And I feel I'm invested in this change that might take place. I read that we're going to be letting a company decide like what's going to happen in terms of the renovations. And I just asked that I could, maybe be in the know about the updates and maybe give some feedback. I also speak on behalf of a lot of people who use the workout station. There's actually a good community of people that I've met who I've worked out with a lot over the years. All different sorts of people. And so I feel like I have a pulse on, what the people kind of want in terms of these changes. And I find this, an important thing for me to just talk about. So, all I ask is that I stay in the know and, I'd like to have a say over the future of that. That's all.
Thank you, Nathan.
The next speaker is Maria Bautista.
Good evening. I just would like to say a few words about item number 6, which is the funding for the library renovation. I just wanted to share with you, which I've shared with the Library Commission and the NCLA, that I think it was somewhat, I kind of really prefer not to use this word, but I would say disingenuous that the Santa Clara Library District came before you and asked for permission essentially to impact our historic orchard for the purposes of having more programming space primarily for their children's activities. And then currently the library is installing essentially a Happy Meal play structure, just taking up a large part of the children's area of the library that was never discussed during that time.
I don't think this is actually your comments aren't on the item that's on the agenda. The item that's on
Oh,
the
it's,
agenda pertains to basically a funding appropriation from NCLA. It has nothing to do with any of the designs, with the orchard, or anything.
but the funding appropriation, as I understand it, though, is for the remodel of the library. And the remodel, so to my point, though, is the remodel of the library currently doesn't include the children's area. And I think there are community members that are concerned as to how the children's area is going to be addressed and incorporated in the remodel. Just as a point of interest. Okay, thank you.
I move that we pass the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Lang,
Yes?
Councilmember Meadows,
Yes.
Councilmember Weinberg,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fleiger,
Yes.
Mayor Daley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing. This is for the introduction of ordinances, zoning code amendments for historic preservation and for the Mills Act. I assume we have a presentation?
And Mayor,
Yes. Oh, and the vice mayor needs to make an announcement.
thank you, Mayor. I need to recuse myself from this item as it presents a potential conflict of interest because of my current employer, the Santa Clara County Assessor's Office, which administers the Mills Act contracts. And so with that, I also have to leave the room as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Staff report?
So good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're going to go over amendments proposed for the Historic Preservation and Mills Act regulations in the city. An overview is tonight you'll be presented with an update which is encompassing a move of the Historic Preservation Ordinance that exists today from the Building Code or Title 12 to the Zoning Code Title 14. This will also establish a Mills Act ordinance, as well as the presentation is going to go over in part the August 26th request from council, which was to add to the agenda an item to review the participation in a Mills Act program for the future. To cover the city, we took this item to the Planning Commission on June 5th. The proposed ordinances were passed by a 4-1 vote. One dissenting vote was cast on the basis that the commissioner believed the ordinances should have been presented or sent to the Historic Commission for consideration. The Historical Commission did receive this proposed ordinance and conducted this review and comment during their meeting on August 18th, so just over a month ago. This came out of the one dissenting vote from the Planning Commission, where it gave staff the opportunity to analyze and reevaluate the necessity of the proposed ordinances to be reviewed by the Historical Commission. So pursuant to section 2.12030, which is the Historical Commission's powers and duties, it does prescribe that they will review and provide comment on proposed historic preservation regulations in an advisory capacity. The ordinances have been reviewed now twice with 2 small groups of residents on August 6th with 4 residents, 3 of which are Mills Act property owners, and then September 4th with 3 Mills Act property owners again. Staff incorporated appropriate comments that were received in writing and were discussed during both meetings and are identified in blue underlined in the draft ordinances. Up until now, the ordinance process and development. The draft ordinances began in April earlier this year by review of the OHP guidelines and as well as the multiple historic preservation ordinances throughout the Bay Area. As mentioned, this went to the Planning Commission in June, then met with residents in August, the Historical Commission in August, meeting with residents again in September, and then now before the council tonight. So to have an overview over the Historic Preservation Ordinance, the existing Historic Preservation Ordinance is located in Title 12, or Buildings and Construction, which is operatively our building code. This has actually largely been in the same location since city incorporation, when the city became a jurisdiction and kind of brought over a lot of our regulations from the county. And so that's why it's kind of in an irregular location within our municipal code. The proposed relocation of the Historic Preservation Ordinance to Title 14 is for, or would be contained then within the zoning code of the municipal code. And the proposed amendments included in the draft largely have clarifying language, as we've seen over the last few years, some of the conflicting language that exists in the existing code, and then also helps to provide specific requirements for when and how historic alteration permits are processed, as the existing language has essentially some code language to nowhere almost, where it doesn't actually essentially finish the process that staff would need to take for certain instances. And then further helps to clarify the review process. This table is just a side-by-side to show essentially the reorganization and the structure of all of the components of the existing ordinance. As there's obviously been public comment that has reflected that the major strike through and underline kind of process doesn't show the side-by-side comparison. However, if it was to be done, it would show an entire strikeout and then a re-add because of the way that it's been reorganized in order to actually help staff as well as the public understand kind of the flow of how the reviews as well as the regulations are essentially a part of the process. To clarify is that there has also been some questions about the review authority. So in the proposed ordinance, historic designations would be reviewed by the Historical Commission, and then they would make their recommendation to the City Council. The City Council would then take final action. This is existing practice already, and so it would not be changed. Again, the Historical Commission has an advisory capacity, which it has been since its inception, and so that's kind of just a consistency from the one code section to the other. The historic alteration permits would be reviewed by the Historic Commission and then makes their recommendations to the zoning administrator. The decision of the zoning administrator would then be appealable to the Planning Commission. This is actually one of those provisions is that in the existing code language, there's certain alteration permits that actually end without saying who then is reviewing the permit. So technically, we have essentially had to kind of figure out how to kind of close the loop on those over the years. And so this actually helps to clean up the language and then would take it to another public hearing that would be duly noticed so that there'd be the opportunity for public comment and analysis. To provide an overview of the Mills Act the Mills Act was first kind of came to be in 1972, which it participating jurisdictions, it grants the authority for them to enter into contracts with qualified historic properties. The city of Los Altos actually has never had a locally adopted Mills Act program ordinance. We've only operated under the guidance of the very long kind of state law in the government code, which doesn't really have some of the essentially review provisions and everything. It does have obviously the basic characteristics that are required in the contracts, but it doesn't have some of the ways that you would actually need to process the permits or the requests rather. The city has been entering into Mills Act agreements since the 1990s, and then as of today, we have 17 Mills Act contracts. The proposed ordinance provides the regulation guidance for the administration of the Mills Act program, but really to help provide some consistent guidelines, which have been based off of the OHP guidelines that are adopted and provided in the packet. So to kind of cover at a high level is what a Mills Act program is it allows contracts with owners of qualified properties who actively participate in restoration and maintenance of historic properties while receiving a property tax relief. The contracts are for an initial minimum of 10 years, which are transferred to subsequent owners, and they do renew automatically, and that would continue until either someone requests essentially to no longer participate or a notice of non-renewal is issued by the issuing jurisdiction. The Santa Clara County Office of the Assessor states that the savings vary between the properties based on its valuation, size, obviously improvements, but then obviously the last time it was transacted, and property owners see anywhere between a 20 to 70% reduction in their property tax base. The contracts obviously do require maintenance, improvements, and rehabilitation of the properties in exchange for that property tax reduction. To close out is that the review authority of Mills Act contracts it would go to the Historic Commission, which then makes the recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council would be the one to take final action, which is what is consistent with today's practice already. So based on the August request from council for a future agenda item, this is going to kind of cover some of the inquiry about future and continued participation in the Mills Act program as a jurisdiction. So just to cover some background, is there are currently 90 jurisdictions throughout California of the 540. So essentially approximately just under 20% of California participates in actually issuing Mills Act contracts. Each jurisdiction does have kind of a different flavor, as they say, is some have actually a competitive application process. Some limit the number of contracts issued each year, and a variety of them actually limit the tax savings to the initial first $3 million of property value. So there's a variety of different local limitations that aren't just local ordinances implementing the state law like what we've crafted before you tonight. So the Mills Act assessment method, to kind of give some background to that, is there are a variety of different assessment methods depending on kind of the valuation and everything, but the property tax rate for houses in California is essentially approximately 1% of the market value. Obviously, local initiatives have some different variances in that. Real property may be reassessed every year. However, under Prop 13, that limits the tax base to a maximum increase of the 2% rule. If the property is sold or significantly remodeled, the taxable basis could be reset and then brought to fair market value. Again, those are things that are all handled at the assessor's office. But under the Mills Act, the taxable basis is determined by the assessor's office. And the assessor sets the tax basis as estimated by the capitalized value of the rental stream of the property. Again, one of the very fun, complex calculations that the county exercises, and the resulting savings is anywhere between 20 to 70%, as previously noted. So I do want to kind of go over this, as this was one of the kind of questions posed as a part of, well, what is essentially the city essentially losing? So kind of a quick rundown of the effective property tax rate in Los Altos, because of local school initiatives and everything, is effectively 1.22%. Of an example property, which is one of our more recent property values of a Mills Act property, was in the ballpark of $4.2 million. Under traditional tax requirements, it would be approximately just over $51,000 a year in annual property taxes. The city allocation, though, as a part of that is we only receive 12% from the county, which means then our essentially share of that annual property tax is just over $6,000. With a city allocation kind of computed that means that under a Mills Act with the 20 to 70% spread of savings, the city would be obtaining essentially anywhere between just under 2,000 to just under 5,000 for that property. Obviously, it will depend on each individual property. To kind of further kind of close this out is that based under the annual property tax savings for an actual property owners with Mills Acts of a $4.2 million valuation could save anywhere between about $10,000 to $36,000 a year in property taxes, depending on the assessor's calculation. Which does mean over the life of a 10-year contract, which is the absolute minimum for a Mills Act, is that a property owner would save $100,000 to $360,000 for their full total savings under Mills Act. The city's loss of this allocation would result in, by multiplying everything out, to approximately just over $200,000 to $730,000 between the 17 properties over a 10-year Mills Act contract for those 17 properties. And that is not taking into account the 2% escalation under Prop 13 or any other kind of essentially factors for increases annually. Benefits, though, of the program is property owners with Mills Acts obviously save that 20 to 70% of annual property taxes, and in turn, the property owners must rehabilitate and maintain their properties. The city benefits from having obviously preserved structures within Los Altos, which is a part of our kind of city policies and direction from over the years. The cost of the program participation at a high level is obviously for owners. If they were to want to do this is for a brand new contract, they're obviously going to have to apply for the application, which does have a fee associated with it. Application materials, which can consist of title report, a historic resource evaluation, and a maintenance plan and a site plan. So there are some costs that are incurred up front. And then obviously the initial and ongoing costs to rehabilitate or remodel and for the required maintenance, obviously, of the structures. The city, we would incur required inspections for the initiation and then the ongoing monitoring of the structures. Enforcement of illegal work, obviously, if that were to occur at a property that has a Mills Act, we'd obviously incur costs with doing that work. But then obviously there is the intended consequence of us entering into contracts is that we would essentially not have that tax levy into the city's revenue streams upon additional executions or continuation of contracts. So that is kind of obviously the overview what the council previously requested. But what is before the council, which is what includes all of the major components and requirements that I've kind of already touched on, but also what is in the guidance from OHP, is these multiple 15 different sections within the Mills Act program ordinance draft that is in front of you this evening. I'm not going to go over all of them, but it does cover everything from eligibility criteria, limitations, definitions, so on and so forth. Additional considerations, though, for the council is that this does have a general plan consistency, is that our last amended general plan was in November of 2002. There are actually only 2 goals in the entire general plan that are surrounded by or for historic preservation. This is obviously more of a generalized blanket one, which is to preserve and enhance selected historic and cultural structures and resources within the community. Obviously, both of these ordinances would help to facilitate that. CEQA compliance, as enclosed in your staff report, as well as the ordinances, is that this has been found to be CEQA exempt under 150161B3. And our recommendation is what's enclosed in tonight's packet, which is to introduce and waive the first reading of the 3 included ordinances and find this exempt from CEQA.
All right, so we will have a couple of questions and then we'll have public comment. I'm going to kick off the questions and just ask you to sort of check my math here because I have done a back of the envelope sort of, ROI analysis. And I see it costing the city about $81,000 a year in tax revenue. And that's using medians for my calculations, right? Because we don't know what the last time each of those 17 properties were assessed, right? But give or take, I came up with 81,000. You came up with a range that was pretty similar. So I guess you're nodding that that's an okay number.
Yes, that's correct.
17 households is out of 10,000 households, 0.17% of Los Altos households impacted directly. My question is, what do you think the staff time involved in supporting the Mills Act program is? And be as back of the envelope as these other calculations? Are we talking about a percentage of a full-time equivalent or something along those lines? What are we looking at?
Yeah, it would only be, I mean, obviously, if we had a big influx of additional contracts, like for example, the city of San Diego reviews 45 Mills Act contracts a year, so that is a full-time person, just because of even monitoring. So for us, obviously, if we didn't have that many contracts coming forward new, it wouldn't be as much of an impact. I would say our senior planner, Sean Gallegos, who's been with us for approximately 12 years, probably does spend anywhere between 5 to 10% of his annual time solely dedicated to working on Mills Act items. However, I will say is that because of staff time shortages and also the necessity to spend more time on the review and monitoring of Mills Acts, he has expressed multiple times is that there actually needs to be more staff time dedicated to the review and monitoring of the structures in order to make sure that we're actually compliant.
Okay, so I'm going to take that to mean that at least 10% of a full-time equivalent of staff is needed, and it might be 15% of a full-time equivalent.
Correct. I will say because the city did a recent permit fee analysis for fees for service, which we adopted just over 2 years ago, is that we estimated based on prior new Mills Act contracts is that for each new contract, it takes approximately 50 hours of staff time to do the review and to get it to a public hearing. And that's under obviously ideal circumstances.
Okay. Still, that gives us a ballpark for understanding what the cost of the city is. It's roughly between 1/10 and 2/10 of a employee and approximately 75 or 80 grand a year, give or take, in tax revenue. Thank you. Other questions, colleagues? Councilmember Weinberg?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. We've received a number of public comments questioning both the noticing of this meeting and the applicability of the council moving forward on the staff request. Could someone on staff just please address that briefly, and maybe the city attorney could reassure us that we have the authority to move forward tonight?
Jolie, do you want to talk about the public hearing notice?
Yes, I have no concerns about the public noticing on this, and I think there was a comment made late this afternoon about somehow that the Palo Alto Daily Post was not properly noticed, but it was. And then, what was your other question?
There were some public comments that suggested that we don't have the authority to move forward
Oh,
with
that
any
would
of
be
them.
for the Historic Preservation Ordinance or the Mills Act?
I think both.
Both, yeah. For the historic preservation, yes, we do have some conflicting information that from what we received, and I see no reason to not go forward with both ordinances tonight, and I'll turn it back over to Nick if he's going to respond to.
I'm gonna add to the city attorney's comment there, and I will defer to the city manager to give detail if need be. But we reached out to the Office of Historical Preservation at the state and asked if this procedure that we're going through is appropriate, and their response was, "Yeah, that's fine. Let us know what modest changes you make to the ordinance after you make them, if you make them."
Wonderful. Thank you for that reassurance. Two more substantive questions. One of them, Mr. Assistant City Manager, your presentation noted that only about 90 of 540 jurisdictions in the state actually have a Mills Act program. I'm wondering if you have any insight as to why more than 80% of the jurisdiction that could participate choose not to participate.
It's fundamentally because of a potential unintended consequence of longstanding Mills Act contracts and tax subsidies, essentially, by providing that tax relief and then having shortfalls in local budgets. And also, inevitably, I do know from some cities, one of the reasons why is because they do not have any control in really setting kind of how the calculation is done, because that happens at the assessor's office. So that's why I think then you have seen some jurisdictions, city and county of San Francisco is one of the few that limits it to $3 million in land value, or improvement value, excuse me. And so that's why, because they have to have some type of a limitation to be able to provide reassurance.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is a little bit more mechanical about the Mills Act ordinance. My reading of the ordinance is when a contract is entered into, it's a 10-year contract, but each year it will automatically renew an extra year. So once a contract is entered into, it's really a contract that goes in perpetuity until the property owner decides they don't want to continue participating. Is that right?
That, or if the jurisdiction issues a notice of non-renewal
Non-renewal.
at some point during the course of the contract.
Yeah,
And
then
what are the
there's- Then there's cancellation, but that's a whole different category.
What are the circumstances under which the city could decide it does not want to continue to participate?
For cancellation, there are obviously, it's more prescriptive because it needs to be like an overt violation.
Like
but
default.
the notice of non-renewal is for, essentially the city is just electing to not continue that on. That's also why there's always the 1 year added essentially to the contracts, is to be able to provide that level of certainty to the property owner, that they have that much left standing on it. For non-renewals, there's not a significant essentially limitation on a jurisdiction from issuing them, but they do still have to go through a publicly noticed process and inform them through that process.
Okay, so let me pose a hypothetical. You have a resident with a property that has a Mills Act contract. It's a 10-year contract. First year, great. Second year, great. It's still a 10-year contract. It's now actually a 12-year contract, but it's extended 1 year each of the first 2 years. The city decides a change in policy that it no longer wants to participate in the Mills Act. At that point, does the city just give notice that there's a policy change? And after having a public hearing confirming that, then that policy becomes effective 10 years later?
Correct.
So there's no way in which the city council could say, at this point, we're stopping it. It's whatever decision we make can't take effect until another 10 years out.
That's correct. The only way to make it take effect immediately would be under a notice of cancellation, which is requires a breach of any condition of the historic property contract.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Councilmember Lang?
Thank you. Several questions here. One, just to be a little more specific on the matter that Councilmember Weinberg brought up. Has the Office of Historic Preservation been provided drafts of the ordinance?
So I transmitted a draft to the one historic preservation office or employee that reviews Mills Acts for the state. And so she has that in her inbox. And she will review it while we are moving through our process. It is the provision that is contained on the annual report is very similar to what we just did with the Historical Commission. It's a review and comment. It is an advisory capacity. And their main goal is to make sure that there is no overt inconsistency with the National Park Service requirements, who are actually the ones that actually authorize.
Yeah, the Department of Interior.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. You mentioned there are two processes. One is to add a property to the historical resource list, which is reviewed by the Historical Commission. They recommend then to council. Council makes the determination. Also the one if it's an alteration and there was a sort of process there, they recommend, goes to the zoning administrator, might be appealed. How about if somebody wants to remove it? Would that be parallel to the adding sort of thing? Goes before the Historical Commission, they make a recommendation, and the City Council makes the final determination on removal? Is that a correct understanding?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. On the appeal in 1493-090, it basically follows the appeal process that we would use for normal planning commission sort of things. And one aspect of that is 300 feet. Now, I understand that for a normal sort of building thing. If you're further away than that, sort of a feeling of like mind your own business is not even close to you. But historical things might be of interest to a broader part of the community than people who just happen to live within 300 feet. And so I'm curious, is there any other possible appeal mechanism, or nobody has, if you're further than 300 feet away from the historical resource, you're out of luck. You don't have the ability to appeal.
There are appeal rights and procedures that are prescribed in Chapter 1.12, which is appeals of the general provisions of the municipal code, where if there is a breach or inconsistency with an administrative determination, they can file it under that, and that does not have a spatial kind of limitation.
So please clarify that. So, for example, if I think that the zoning administrators are proving something that they think is a fairly trivial change, but I disagree, is that other alternative appeal mechanism you described available to me, or no?
So if the zoning administrator is making the discretionary determination, that's going to a quasi-judicial body, so it's not an administrative decision. The administrative decision would be like at the staff level, if they essentially reject the submittal in its entirety, you could then appeal it to the council in order to be able to remedy that action.
Okay. I think I understand that. Then over into the Mills Act thing, the city only receives, of course, a portion of the tax that is reduced. But I think this is true, but I just want to say it to be clear. We are making a determination of reducing that tax, and that will impact other organizations, for example, the school districts and others. They don't have any say. We're essentially the stewards that are determining whether this is a good idea or not, even though other people are going to be impacted by our decision. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no further questions.
Councilmember Meadows?
Thank you, Mayor. So the appendices, there are some blue additions. Are those staff recommendations or staff offerings for council to choose between?
So I guess in your words, not mine, it's staff offerings for consideration of the council. The blue strike through or blue underline was essentially after meeting and conferring with the property owners that had specific concerns about some of the proposed regulations.
Right. So you're, through conversations, being showing what you're willing to put forward that came from those conversations, which, mind you, is not everything that came forward, but this is what you're willing to live with of everything that came out of the conversations, okay? So can you confirm, and I think it might be important for the later part of the conversation, that the general plan contract that we approved in consent will include, as part of that update, a historic preservation ordinance, a whole look in detail of our historic practices in town, or what, that's not the best phraseology, but is that correct?
Yes, so actually, as a part of a comprehensive general plan update, when you update a land use element, you have to look at all known and potential historic resources within the jurisdiction. So that is forthcoming. And as I've said to the council before, we have a history in Los Altos of kind of bifurcating or segmenting when we do things, and some things get done out of order, and then kind of result in somewhat of a conflict. And so that is a key task that's a part of our comprehensive general plan update for the city.
All right, thank you. I think that might be important later in the discussion. So one other point when we talk about the maintenance that Mills Act property owners are required to do, and it sounds like the contracts renew annually, but the inspections are once every 5 years, correct?
Correct.
And so you really only get one look in during that 10-year period before the first 10 years is up to know if the agreed upon maintenance is being conducted. Is that true? I mean, does it all get to be done at 9 years and 11 months? Or do you expect to see some progress by 5 years, just out of curiosity?
Most commonly in recent years, we've seen them front-loaded in regards to, it's more so not really maintenance, but actually the rehabilitation. And to some degree, there's been certain structures that have been rehabilitated, so much so that it's essentially been like a full rehabilitation of the structure. The siding, the roof, so on and so forth. The maintenance, though, if there's certain things that are kind of the ongoing things, there's obviously the known, and then there's always the unknown ones that kind of pop up and emerge. But you can have it somewhat if it's a structure that's kind of in pretty good condition when they enter into the Mills Act. They probably are going to pace it throughout the 10-year agreement and maybe do it like every 2 years. Or you do have some folks that, depending on certain improvements, a roof is usually 30 years, give or take. And so those would actually exceed the life of the initial contract. So it really does depend on exactly what required improvements and maintenance. So it is structure specific.
Right, okay, I can see that. And actually, you just bring up what could be another important point, and because I see some marvelous work done on some of these homes. Some of the people are in this room. And I've thought of it as remodels, but in reality, these are rehabilitations, because you're taking a historic structure and rehabilitating it to the interior standards, but at modern standards of living. Is that a correct way of, I didn't probably phrase it well, but that's more or less what a rehabilitation is versus a remodel?
Yeah, it's also one of the things that the assessor looks at more delicately than a typical non-historically designated structure, where they would probably just reassess it because it has touched essentially every room potentially, where a historically designated structure they will have to walk a fine line when they're assessing it to see if it's actually just because of the rehabilitation of the structure in order to be able to maintain it.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, we talk about the reason that we do this is that the public, that Los Altos values historic structures, and that the public receives benefit from them. And one part of that benefit is the visibility. Because if we can't see a structure, I'm not sure how much benefit there really is. So visibility speaks to landscaping. It also speaks to flag lots. So if we can't, and I'm not trying to pick on a specific, I'm going to use a hypothetical of a property that's a flag lot. but we don't distinguish, or do we distinguish on the public benefit of a Mills Act property that may have visibility challenges? Let's just put it that way.
I think if it was a flag lot, that's going to pose a significant challenge because we do have some flags that are kind of have a really long flagpole. But the ones that have overgrown, hedges and stuff, those are something that could be incorporated essentially as a part of the actual contracts moving forward that require them to be visible from the street ongoing, because yes, there have been instances where they have not been.
Okay, did any of my colleagues come up with more questions hearing from their other colleagues? No? Okay. So now we will go to public comment. How many cards do we have?
I know there's more coming, but so far we have 9, 10. Do you have 2 here? So we have 10 so far. Anybody else? And then we have, we received 2 requests to cede time to Mr. John Baer. However, depending on the time you allot, we're allowing up to 5 minutes. And I believe our norms state that we can only allow for 1 seating time. So I'll give it to the first person who notified me.
Our norms on seating time,
It says a single speaker may cede their time to one other speaker.
Correct.
The designated speaker will be given the time which would have been
correct.
allocated to the
So all
other.
that means is that a speaker cannot cede their time to more than one person. So with the number that we have, we'll go for 1 minute apiece, and that means that the gentleman who is getting time ceded from other speakers will have the number of speakers plus his times 1 minute.
So, oh, thank you. Okay. So 3 minutes, okay. So the first speaker, we will just go with John Baer, just to
Sure.
do that first.
Good evening. I'm one of 15 Mills Act property owners committing to preserve Los Altos history, many of whom are here tonight. We're a group of 15 owning iconic homes such as Shoup House, Merriman Winchester House, Marini Mansion, Ames Barn, Farnsworth Myers House. You get the picture. The group has collectively put in over $30 million into restoration and maintenance of these homes. That is to say, putting our money where our mouth is. At an estimated cost to the city of $35,000 to $50,000, your numbers are inaccurate because there are homes that are much older, and over time, Mills Act, the value of Mills Act goes down. So that's why we have a difference in numbers. Perhaps it is the most successful public-private partnership the city has. Think of it that way. Preservation is hard, it's expensive, it's time-consuming, it's never-ending, and details matter in order to meet Secretary of the Interior standards. There are reasons movies and books are written about buying and restoring old homes and have Money Pit as part of their title. Mills Act helps some, for which we are grateful to the city providing this to us, and we understand and expect the city to hold us accountable for using the tax savings as intended to preserve and maintain our historic homes. And as based on my experience with my fellow Mills Act owners, we are doing that. While the proposed changes to Mills Act do not directly affect us, we want to ensure that future Mills Act people have the opportunity to participate and don't have a burden so great that they demo a house instead of preserving it. Several of us met with Nick and Gabe. There were changes made, but there are other changes that were not included, and I'm going to talk about them very briefly. We take our contracts seriously. The cost of us breaching a contract today is about $600,000, believe it or not, okay? In the reasons in which the city can terminate an agreement, we continue to advocate for the word material as an adjective in the descriptions. If I make a single mistake, I could be in breach. I say the wrong word, I use the wrong nail, I can be in breach. That doesn't seem fair or appropriate. requiring a homeowner to hire and pay for a historic preservation expert to do a 10-year review. The city should want to hire the expert. They would want to pay for it. They would want to manage that. It makes better sense for the city, and they can spread that cost among numerous property owners at the same time. With regard to the historic preservation ordinance, limiting the notification appeal within 300 feet just isn't fair or appropriate. The community has a vested interest in these properties. And finally, allowing a historic structure to be torn down based on it being unsafe with no guardrails, no review, no documentation, and no appeal is just plain wrong. Joint meetings of Planning Commission and Historical Commission, they, in theory, make sense, but the reality is you shortchange each group, and it doesn't give the public the opportunity to weigh in. I'm asking you send this back to staff and then to the Historical Commission so they can actually weigh in on this and vote for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bear.
We've received one other seed time. This is for to Maria Bautista, so we have one seed, so 2 minutes total to Maria.
Could I ask Mr. Bear a question?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Bear, for your thoughts. And curious, there was a comment earlier from staff about the right to appeal that's embodied in 1.12.010 of our municipal code. Have you by chance had a chance to read that? And
I have not read that, but from the description of it by city staff, I think it's inadequate. I think there are many reasons people may want to appeal a determination on a historic property. And I think, you know, we are in, particularly with Mills Act properties, as a community, we're investing in them. So we really should all have an interest and an opportunity to voice our interest and concerns. And if it's a city-owned property, ditto. So I think it's something that's important.
thank you.
Thank you.
Maria Bautista.
Okay, so 2 minutes.
Mayor, we just received another request to cede time to Maria.
3 minutes then.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'd just like to begin with recognizing that since our founding 75 years ago, which we'll be celebrating next year, Los Altos has valued its history. We know that places with vibrant historical interest are always the most desirable and are increasingly rare. That historic resources that are protected, they increase property values, visitor attraction with economic benefits, raise community pride and reinvestment as our Mills Act owners, and generally have a high priority on education. Representing the Preservation Action League Los Altos, I'd like to say that we believe that altering the foundational laws that speak to historic resources and the environment should not be done in haste. We have issues both with process and the content of what's being presented to you tonight. We know in the city that we begin with all of our commissions creating every year a work plan that is then approved by City Council. These changes, amendments, and introductions of new historic preservation ordinances are not on the 2025 work plan for the commission, for the Historical Commission, frankly caught everybody off guard. So I would have you recognize that we started there. And I think that if we really are being honest with ourselves, rebooting this process would be immensely helpful to everybody so that we all have certainty around all of the elements of both the Historical Preservation Ordinance and the Mills Act Ordinance. Generally, it would appear first on the work plan. It would then allow us to look at both our historical resource inventory that we know is never fully completed, is in need of update, and is a guiding document for ordinances. So the thing that we create in-house along with the drafting guidelines that are provided by the Office of Historic Preservation, those two things would be looked at together as we move forward as a community with public sessions to draft the most effective and acceptable version of a historic ordinance. I do think it's exciting that we are looking at it because we will all benefit by updates, but I would encourage you again to reboot and undergo a process that really does start at the beginning and is well informed. and is also considered a project that is funded, where we have hired professionals in historic preservation driving the project, and sufficient public participation along the way to ensure that we are crossing all of the T's and dotting all of the I's. The process also I'd like to speak to, because I had a very different response from the Office of Historic Preservation than what I heard tonight. The Office of Historic Preservation actually, the CLG requirement with the city obligates the city to provide to the office a draft of an ordinance, and I get concerned when the changes might have been put across as being minor. So I would encourage you to
Thank
have
you,
that
Ms.
in hand
Batista.
first. Thank you.
The next speaker is Lois Bayer.
Thank you. Good evening. When my husband and I moved to Los Altos 27 years ago, we appeared before City Council for permission to tackle our enormous restoration project. Council was supportive, encouraging, and appreciative of what we planned. Mills Act provided a benefit that helped us, but the fact is, by caring for and preserving the historic properties of Los Altos, we homeowners are providing a benefit to the town as well. We recently did a renovation of the landscape of our home. I was regularly, almost daily, stopped by people walking by who told me how much they loved our house and wanted to ask questions about the house and the history of it. We received emails and texts from friends and neighbors saying the same thing. I found a note on my car from someone saying something similar. I even came home one day and there was some woman I didn't know standing in front of my house taking a picture of it. Historic homes and areas are the heart and soul of any town. It's where the town began. It's those properties that give a town its grace and charm. We have a history museum to remind residents and visitors of the early days of our town. Our historic homes do that as well, and it's not just for the adults. Our homes provide an education and resource for our children as well.
Thank you, Ms. Baer.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Roberta Phillips.
Hi. So given 1 minute, I have a really big problem about the 300 feet notification, and because the properties that the city owns that are, it belongs to all of us, and I think we all should have input on that. Also, it seems like it's not broken. You have 17 families that are working, doing their due diligence, taking care of their property. It's really a drop in the bucket of how much tax revenue the city isn't getting compared to our budget. So I think that my opinion is that you should reject this. Nick is really smart, but I don't think his expertise is in historic preservation. It's just not. I don't think this belongs in the zoning code. I think historic preservation is its category of its own. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips.
The next speaker is Kirsty Elder.
Hello again. You've heard the passions and support and expenses incurred by Los Altos residents to preserve Los Altos history, and I hope you will carefully enact any changes to mills that will be simple for the city. My impression from some of these changes is they actually are not more simple for the city. It's not going to reduce costs for them, and but it would also be supportive of the citizens' contributions to the city. And so I think it's really important to save our past now and to help those people save it for the future. So I think there is a need for revision and really careful look at what's going to be, what the changes are going to be. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Daniel. I'm going to butcher this. Thank you.
Yes, hello. I'm one of the 15 Mills Act owners. And I just want to say that I feel that owning historical property, it really adds the character to the neighborhood. And my house, I live at Grant Road. I feel that it really acts as a local landmark. And I have people who, like when I work in the yard, people will walk by and then they will just randomly comment to me, how beautiful my house is. And sometimes even thank me for, maintaining and keeping it beautiful. So I just have one comment. So there is this new requirement in the document that the homeowners are required to hire a historical professional every 10 years at their own expense to review and recommend changes, which was not there before. So I would agree with John that it would make much more sense if this historical professional is hired by the city and he or she can review all the properties at the same time, and the cost would be burdened by the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Acorn Pooley.
Hello, I'm Acorn. We, the Mills Act property owners, have a great interest in preserving the history of Los Altos, and the time and effort we put into restoration, I think, shows that. I appreciate the time that the city manager has put into simplifying the law and making it more clear. It's in the past been difficult to understand. However, what was described as a simplification and just moving it from one place to another is actually quite a significant change. And as we look through it, we find that there are significant issues like the ones that have been raised already that make it more difficult to enter into a contract. Our understanding is that our contracts are not affected by this, but we're worried that it will make it more difficult for future Mills Act participants. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Warren Yang.
Hi, we are the owners of the Winchester Merriman House, and as John says, we are currently putting a lot more money into the house than we are getting in benefits. But I think more importantly, speaking to the public aspect of this, like they said, we have lots of people who just come by. I talked to a car full of 20-year-olds who are Winchester Mystery House employees who heard about the house and wanted to stop by. My wife has talked to an elderly gentleman who just came by to tell us that he had worked on the house 40 years ago. So, the Mills Act is a great benefit for us, and I would just say, any changes, please just be very careful. Thank you.
The next speaker is Alice Mansell.
Good evening. Your staff report tonight says that the Historical Commission in August had no objections. That statement is disingenuous. The fact is that the City Council over there advised them in person that they had a quorum 3 of 5 rule because there are 5 seats. Even if not all are filled, they had to have at least 3 agreeing to do anything, such as a recommendation to you, thumbs up or thumbs down. The vote in August was 2 of your commissioners voted, rubber stamped the staff report. 1 said no, 1 was absent, and 1 seat was vacant. So they did not reach the quorum of 3 of 5. Again, to say your historical commission had no objections to this is disingenuous. Instead, there was a discussion that this, because it was a special meeting, too fast, a rush, they wanted more time. So kick it down, please, and do it again. Why the rush?
Thank you, Ms. Mansell.
Comments making a suggestion why there's this obscene rush. Thank you.
The last card is Teresa Morris.
Okay, well, I want Nick to clarify.
Good evening, Teresa Morris. I do serve on the Park and Rec Commission, but I am not speaking as a Park and Rec Commissioner this evening. I'm speaking as a resident. My very biggest ask had already been stated by Roberta Phillips, which is expand the notification area for any changes being made. I usually say 500 to 1,000 feet would be ideal. I know legally this is not something that needs to be done, but it's something that I think the more eyes, the more input we have on different topics, the better our city will be for it. Also, when I think of historic resources, I do think of things like the Painted Ladies in San Francisco and the Winchester Mystery House. We don't put a dollar value on those of how much staff time they may be taking cities to do. These are assets that we value usually as residents, and I think residents need to have the ability to have input about changes that are being made. So sending this back to the Historic Commission might be a good idea because it gives more input, more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Are there any other? Okay. I'll bring it back to my colleagues for deliberation now. Does somebody want to kick us off with their comments or views on this?
I'll have a go.
I think it's appropriate that our colleague who was on the History Commission set the stage for us.
All right, I'll do my best. Boy, a lot going on here, and this matter before us is of particular interest to me as an 8-year alum of the Historical Commission. A lot of this is perhaps a little bit more intuitive to me than it might be to some others. Certainly, I hope that 8 years of serving on that commission suggests that I personally care about historic preservation in this city, and certainly enjoyed my time very much during that. I want to thank all the people who spoke here this evening on this topic. I listened to it. I also particularly want to thank all the people who submitted things in writing. I know the verbal stuff can feel a little rushed. Sorry about that. We just have to be respectful of time. And I want to just emphasize both on this matter and other matters that we see. The written stuff really matters. It matters a lot because it gives us the time to read it, consider it, reach out to staff, check facts, and so forth. So please understand that every single written comment on this matter, as with all matters, I read personally carefully and thought about. And the people who took the time to do that, I'm very appreciative of it. It's a work, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. Maybe into two different parts here. First, on the revisions to the historical code, I think they make very good sense. It's confusing, I know, but that it ends up in zoning, but that is in fact the proper place for it. The police power, and this is a sort of legal sense of police power that the city has over historical structures flows from our right to do zoning, which goes back to Supreme Court law and all the rest of it, right? It belongs in zoning, legally speaking. It may seem a little odd, but that is in fact the correct place for it to be. And so I think it is appropriate to move it there. And you know, I'm supportive of all that. On the Mills Act, let's talk about that a little bit. We saw a number of Mills Act properties while I was serving on the commission, and both the people working on Mills Act, and for that matter, just the people who are taking care of historic resources and historic landmarks in town. Routinely, I found that they were working very hard on it. They took it as a very personal challenge to stewardship around these things. I routinely came away from the readouts on all of those projects with a deep sense of gratitude for the commitment that the people put in. And never once did I come away with a sense that there was some sort of cynical gaming of the system of the tax code or whatever. Reasonable people can disagree about, you know, is it a worthwhile investment? But in no circumstance did I see anything but a good faith effort to use the resources to, in fact, improve and protect the resource. And I think it's very worth saying that. That said, I do think it's worth revisiting this and honestly tightening it up a little bit. And why is that important? Well, I hear and I appreciate the concern that if we make it too burdensome, it may put people off. That's a fair concern. But these are very substantial savings, and, you know, few hurdles. It's not the end of the world to get this level of saving, particularly because I think it helps protect our Mills Act program. And here's why I say that, right? There's about 10,000 households in town, 10,000 minus 17 of them have every right to go, is this being properly administered? Are we to have the right checks and balances on this and all those things? Candidly, I think the city has been a little bit behind in its obligations. I think this is, in many ways, we're revisiting not because of the owners, but rather because the city needs to resolve. And I think it was a good questions that I heard earlier about, and I appreciate the comment about needing to add to resources beyond the intrepid work of Mr. Gallegos, who does great work. But if we're going to keep track of these things, and I think our stewardship of that, both for the city, but as I indicated in my questions, we're also the stewards for everybody else who would have gotten this tax revenue, right? The school district, the county, everybody else who depends on the tax revenue. And so I think all of us who value the Mills Act should want it to be a fairly rigorous program. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and it's fair that the safeguards around all that money should be rigorous, because that way people will understand it's a fair program that's properly looked after and should continue. So I'm very supportive of this. I will say probably the thing that concerns me the most right now is that 300-foot. I think when I look at that appeals process, it makes great sense in pure planning commission sort of things, where if you're further than 300 feet away from new construction or major alteration, honestly, get on with your life. It's not really your business anymore, right? Whereas the historical structures, like I think if, not to pick anybody, you can name some very important historical structures that are in the Mills Act protection. I think if some of those structures were threatened with very substantial changes, it would be fair for many members of the community who don't live within 300 feet to care about that. And I'm still trying to understand, candidly, what's going on with that appeals process about it. One other thing I'll say is, obviously, well, maybe it wasn't obvious. I think it wasn't obvious, actually, but we should say it so that it becomes more clear. The contracts that are in place are not in discussion here. Those are contracts. Can't change contracts. I mean, we can over 10 years, but as a practical matter, those contracts are in place. Much of the input that we've received from the Mills Act folks has been because they care about the program and they're thinking about people who might want to use it in the future, and I appreciate that. But we're also not talking about those right now, right? Those contracts will be proposed later, and I think in each one of those cases, council will be weighing the costs and the benefits of including a new Mills Act, if anybody should propose them, in the thing. One key thing that I know I would be looking at that we overlooked in previous contracts would be visibility, right? We did not include that in previous contracts, and some folks have allowed the visibility to be compromised. I personally would want to see that in future contracts as one example. But that's for another day. The other contracts are for another day. In general, I'm quite supportive of putting this new structure in place and making that key. I'll say one other thing here. There's a lot of discussion about procedure and all of that, and I appreciate that. And of course, we rely on staff and council to make sure that we're on the straight and narrow with what we need to do, and so we count on their advice about that. But that's letter of the law. There's also spirit of the law, and I reached out to historical commission members that I know, because I'm an alum, right? I know a number of them. And I said, look, putting aside all the procedures, do you think we'd benefit from more deliberation? Should we send it back? Do you want to talk about it some more? And the answer is no. The answer is we've talked about it. We're comfortable where it is. You can argue about every last word or provision forever. But in those conversations, when I asked that question, I was told, no, I think it's time to go ahead. So I don't, of course, if we were procedurally wrong, I would want to comply with that. But even in terms of just the spirit of the rules was proper deliberation given? I'm told yes. People may well disagree with me, but I'm content that we've done enough deliberation as a community to get to the point where we are tonight. And so with that, I'll
There's
close.
a policy question too. Do you want to opine on that?
Or
The mayor can take it. I'll leave it to you, Mayor, but we're also supposed to be opining on who can.
I have opinions about that.
I bet you do.
Yes.
So, but Mayor, if you want to do that at the end and have us all give our input first or whatever, but I don't know which way you prefer. It's about who can
Yeah, it's the,
flag things.
who can pitch.
Who can pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can give your opinion on that now, or we can.
No, I'm on a roll, so why not?
Yeah.
So the question arises, who can propose a resource to, a property to be on the list? And the three that are in the draft are the owner for the historic resource list. One is the owner themselves, makes sense. Another is the historical commission, can among themselves, even if the owner isn't that excited about it, can decide, no, it's so important, we're going to nominate for it. And of course, the city council can do that, right? There's a question of, should somebody who's not the owner be allowed to do that? And I strongly disagree with that idea. I think it really leads to a very bad direction indeed. And I think the reason for that is because, you know, I've seen it. I've seen, particularly in the context of historical district, where people, even in good faith, and keep in mind, it might not be in good faith, right? But even people in good faith who think they're doing something good by protecting a neighborhood got their neighborhood all up in arms because people are like, who are you to do this to me? This wasn't my idea. Now, you can say, look, you know, they'll have a chance to object, but to me, that's the wrong way to approach it. If anyone in the community thinks that a property should be on the historical resource list, the correct thing to do is start with the owner. Go have a conversation. Convince them of why it's a good thing to do, of particularly if you are a historic holder, why it's been a good thing for you. Or go to the Historic Commission. There's always time at the beginning of the agenda to bring things up. Try to convince them. But I strongly disagree with the notion that a person who is not the owner can, as an individual, put a property into play for historical listing.
Who wants to go next? Councilmember Weinberg.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Lang almost with the entirety of what he said, and I'm glad he went first because you said a lot of the things that were floating in my mind, but much more eloquently, I think, than I would have been capable of saying them. But I do want to echo your thanks to the community that has participated. We have a lot of members of the public here today. We have received a lot of public comment. That is all extremely useful. The written public comments really are, I personally find, and I suspect that my colleagues and staff would feel the same way, getting written comments as far ahead of time as possible that really explain and identify where you believe changes could be made to make the decisions before council even better. Those are extremely useful. It's much easier, and I think a much more thorough process to look at comments from the public and be able to compare those to statutes as opposed to just hearing things orally. And there are comments that were received by the Historical Commission. I attended the last Historical Commission meeting when they were talking about this subject. And again, the written comments really were important. And I also want to thank the members of the public who reached out to staff and met with staff to go over some of their concerns. I think that was an extremely useful process. And I want to thank staff for engaging with the public. I mean, I think we want to be a city that engages with the residents. I mean, we're government is here to serve the residents. So going the extra mile and meeting with residents, I think is very important. So thank you for that. On the policy question, I agree again with Councilmember Lang. And I would go further to say that if there is a request for inclusion on the HRI, it should be the entirety of the ownership of a property that is behind putting it on. I think if there's a split decision amongst multiple owners of the property, that's not good enough. It should be all the owners that want to go in on it. And I would hope that the final ordinance would make that clear. There are two things about the ordinance that one of the only other aspect of the ordinance that I am concerned about, it's the Mills Act ordinance, is the notion that the 10-year contract extends 1 year for every year. I don't think that that's a good idea. I think that if a council wants to make a change because of our budgetary needs or the school district's budgetary needs or simply some kind of a sea change in what it is that we're applying, how we want the Mills Act contracts to be structured. If there was a change in law and our Mills Act contracts don't comply with law, we've already established that this council doesn't want to go through the effort of trying to make alterations to existing contracts, and I think that's the proper way to go. But I think it would be a mistake for us to enter into a process whereby future contracts are essentially ad infinitum, because there may be legitimate policy reasons or there may be statutory reasons that a contract should be altered. So I would request that we eliminate the provision that adds a year automatically, so that there at least is a 10-year look-in, and a council at that point can decide whether they want to go in for another 10 years. And if we are going to go in for another 10 years, we're sure that the contract that is entered into meets whatever new statutory requirements might be in effect. So, with that, thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Meadows, do you want to go now?
I would like
Good.
to, yes. But I want to ask for clarification on what Councilmember Weinberg just said, because although the way it's written, 1 year gets added each year, which is a weird construct, I think, intuitively, but don't we we still measure by 10-year increments, don't we? Or are we measuring by 5-year increments?
You always, the way that the ordinance is drafted is that you'd always be left with 10 years. You could write the ordinance to say is that it's 10 years without an automatic, so you're essentially writing new contracts with an expiration date. So you're not allowing the automatic renewal clause.
No, I think I'm asked, well, that's a good answer to a question that I didn't ask. That's probably a good question to have asked. But what I was asking is, if we kept it as it is, we still have look-ins. We don't, I mean, it's not always 10 years. There's a 10-year look-in. Isn't there then 10 years out from the original? Isn't it on anniversary dates every 10 years that you would look in, even if you're renewing it every year? Or I don't know the mechanics of it.
Well, the statute says each contract shall provide that on the anniversary date of the contract or such other annual date as specified in the contract, a year shall be added automatically to the initial term of the contract unless notice of non-renewal is given as provided in this section.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a different question. I'm not
Yeah, I mean,
expressing it well, but Larry knows what Councilmember Lang knows
think
what I'm
there's sort of two things here. And anyway, I think there's actually a value to the rolling thing. And the reason for that is if you don't have it, you create a perverse incentive at the end of the contract, right? Because many of the decisions that a property owner is making are going to last for multiple years, right? And so if they, towards the end, they might be looking at, you know, a new roof, say, or something where it's going to be a substantial added investment to make it a historically compliant roof. If they have 6 months to go and they don't know whether it's going to be renewed or not, you have this sort of perverse incentive where they might just say, well, I'm not going to put a new roof on until I know for certain in a year or two whether I have a new contract or not, right? So the point of the rolling thing, you can decide whether this is worth it. I'm not saying otherwise. I'm just saying that the reason why it tends to be constructed that way is the notion that property owners, when they're making investment decisions, have to be thinking out multiple years as they decide whether or not it makes sense, right? There's also an advantage to it, which is that the contract follows the property. If the property is sold, then whoever buys it next gets to live with the contract for that period of time. And I know of at least one Mills Act property where the reason why the owner entered into it was that they were contemplating selling. And the reason they wanted the Mills Act protection was to make sure that whoever they sold it to had to continue the stewardship into the future, right? So there are reasons why those things can make sense. As for the look-in, you know, it does call, and in fact, in subsequent contracts, we can always put things in, right? About asking for annual reports about how much has been expended and things like that. That's not inspections, which is a different thing. That's a longer time frame, but those reports should be doable. I should say, as a practical matter, the city has been, how to put this, overwhelmed by other duties and has not been in a good position to request or check whether those reports are coming in. And my experience in terms of that interface is it's been much more about the city not following up as much as an unwillingness of the mills owners to report out on what they're doing. Certainly, it's reasonable for us to ask for people to provide an annual accounting. We just sometimes haven't. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's probably enough on that. So, but it's good, and we can pick it up if enough council members want to, depending on the mayor. So let me give you my comments then. I just wanted to follow up on that right on the heels of the comment. So, so one thing, so yes, thank you to the public, and I agree, the written comments are actually sometimes helpful in case you get cut off in terms of time and you have more time to formulate. Not to say the oral comments aren't helpful as well, but thank you to staff. I know you spent a lot of time meeting with people, and it was a very long process to get to where we are tonight. Thank you to the commission and the commissioners, both historical and planning commission, for looking at this. One thing I hear implicitly, and I want to dissuade everyone, I want to make explicit, is when we look at historic ordinances, it doesn't mean we're anti-historic properties. I mean, this is implicit in some, and I understand there's a fear mechanism, we're making changes, and so certainly we're going to make the changes that are to some way not advantageous, and I don't think that's what we're doing. And just like a lesson to us is, and I don't think that's why we're asking the questions. We have fiduciary responsibilities to ask the questions about the money, but we're not assuming that anyone's being, cynical and looking for this property tax benefit, because as many of you have said, and I know, not from my own experience owning historic properties, but seeing them in my career in the city, and I'll touch on that in a moment, it's a labor of love. Just the time you spend on doing this, the work that you do, the cost of it. So we're not devaluing history, but we're trying to make our processes better. And again, we can have discussions on whether they're actually becoming better or not. That's fine. But I just wanted to. So I started first seeing historic properties, never sat on the historical commission, but I first saw them on design review commission. And there's a beautiful property on Yerba Buena. It was a farmhouse that they first redid the water tower, one of the few water towers remaining in town, and then they turned around the main house, and this property went on for years. I don't even want to know what it wants to cost, and I think I saw them midway through the process. They're like, oh my God, we had no idea it was going to take so long and so much money, and seeing nods here. So this is what's involved in restoring historical properties, and it's a labor of love. And I've said this, Mr. Bear's heard me say this before, and so that will take me directly to the policy question. I am exactly where Councilmember Lang expressed that we have to have people, whether it be owners or potentially historical commissioners or the city council, that puts things forward for inclusion in the historic resource inventory. We can't have sort of drive-by, this is a little bit of a harsh word, but vigilanteism for the community to try to put properties. And that's because people who do this, it's a labor of love for you, and we love. You've given us examples. All of you have talked tonight about the people who stop you and admire. I've been to a beautiful event at a beautiful home for one of the couples sitting here tonight. So these are treasures, and we're trying to figure out the best way to have it work for our entire community. So policy question, I support it as it has been. I don't support anyone can propose somebody in that queue. Let's see, that was a bit of an impassioned explanation there. I do think that, we have blue edits and, red edits is basically the change. I see it's a little bit more than a housekeeping exercise, but it's really particularly looking at the historic preservation, putting it where it belongs. Again, Councilmember Lang described that very eloquently for us. And I didn't, not not being an expert, but I didn't see that many substantive changes. And so I brought up earlier the fact that we're through the general plan update. One of the things that the consultant we just approved for tonight is going to be looking at this. So everything we identified tonight, if we approve things, but we have things that are open and that we want to be explored further, to me, that's a good place to put it. So, I'm not that comfortable. I think we received a very detailed public comment about each of the proposed blue edits that are offered by staff through the conversations that were had. And I don't think we touched on that, but I actually don't necessarily support the blue edits. I support the appendices as they were. For the very reasons that were so carefully delineated in the public comment. Let's see, what else do I want to say? I do want to clarify because I watched the Historical Commission meeting in question today, on the video to see what went on. And I want to clarify what a member of the public said, because I don't think it was exactly accurate, at least from what I saw in the video. And the Historical Commission, and we have the chair here so she can shake her head if she disagrees or not, the Historical Commission didn't take a vote. It was 3 members, one of whom didn't feel prepared to vote. And so in reality, we would have, as a council member, we probably would have abstained in that scenario, but there was no vote taken. And the 2 who were ready to vote said they would have said yes. It is correct that there was no vote taken, but the hearing or the discussion was held. So I just thought that was an important clarification. There was no vote, and that again adds on to what Councilmember Lang had to say. So I appreciate that we're tidying this up. I didn't realize we didn't have our own Mills Act ordinance, so I think it's a good thing to put in place. Again, I'm willing to go forward with things depending on what my colleagues want to do. And again, if we look at this in the next year and through the general plan update process, we can put specific questions forward to them, as can the Historical Commission, I assume. So to me, I think we're making steps in the right direction, and I appreciate everyone's involvement in this process. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Meadows. I'm going to start by saying I agree with John Baer. This is a very good public-private partnership, and the city gets a lot of value. And the reason that I was asking the questions about getting a sense, a ballpark sense, not a precise sense, but an accurate ballpark sense for what kind of tax revenue we're looking at foregoing, is because I think the $30 million or so that the 15 Mills property owners who are here have put into their properties is a heck of a return on investment for approximately $80,000 a year or less per property. And there is no doubt that historic preservation and the historic narratives that are associated with our community are really important to Los Altos, really important to lots and lots of residents, and it's been established as a priority by our council and by previous councils as well. So, for starters, I'm in favor of having a Mills Act ordinance to start with, right? Because I think it is a good program. I don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'm sure that there are ways that it could be improved, but to Councilmember Meadows' point, governing is a process and not a destination, and we will be in the process of governing and have other opportunities to further improve these policies. On the 300-foot noticing, I am sympathetic to those who would like the noticing circumference to be larger. I understand where that desire comes from, but I don't think that the distinction that my colleagues have applied to historical properties, that distinction isn't dispositive for me, because almost anything that the city engages in, whether it's a transformer at Grant Park or whether it is, historical alteration permit that is being approved, everything that the city does has meaning, value, importance to every one of the residents, even if it's for no other reason than somebody has concerns about us spending money wisely, right? Even if they don't care what the transformer at Grant Park looks like or anything else. Everybody who's in the city, who pays taxes in the city, or who comes to the city to work or to shop or for any other reason, they are all stakeholders in everything that comes before council or any of the other bodies. Yes, Councilmember Lang.
Just a point of clarification. To me, when I read the section on the appeal procedure that is incorporated by reference, it's not about noticing, it's about standing, right? So just to be clear about that, right?
So there is
anyway.
a difference in standing for somebody who is proximate to a project than somebody who has a distal interest in the project, like, is the city being good about spending tax dollars, right? So every stakeholder has an interest. Those that are proximate within that 300-foot radius, in my mind, have unique and particular interests that are more substantial than the interests that all of the other stakeholders have. So I'm okay with that 300 feet. I'm also aligned with my colleagues on the policy question about who can submit properties to be added to the historic resources inventory. I know from experience that historical preservation is frequently used as a tool to thwart development or other progress, or just projects that one party wants to do and another party doesn't. And we don't want to see that happen. But certainly there is a way that the interested public can come to the city, either through the historical commission or through the council, to say, look, my neighbor wants to put an ungodly addition on their house, and their house is really historic, and we need to take a step back and think about this as a historic resource. So I think that we have we have a mechanism for those interested in historical preservation to make suggestions and tee that up, but we also don't want them to be able to just say, you know what, I got to go to work early in the morning and I don't want to hear construction at my neighbor's house, so I'm going to, make a claim that it's a historical property even though it's, was built 4 years ago or something. Those kinds of things happen. They do. Not everybody has the same good faith that all of the residents that I see before me have. Those folks that are in mills contracts are more or less the paragons of preservation, whereas some of the other ne'er-do-wells that I'm thinking of, are not as worthy, in my opinion. So, and I would be okay eliminating the provision in future contracts that adds a year. I don't like that rolling contract. I think there would be some better way to achieve the goal of keeping incentives aligned with historic preservation, which I think is how this provision originally evolved. And I think we could do that without creating burdensome unintended contractual consequences for the city going forward. So that's where I am on these things. I favor having the Mills Act ordinance in our code. I think it's fine to move the historic preservation provisions to the appropriate section of code, and I don't see that the changes in that ordinance are substantive. And I will also say that this has not been a rushed process. That's nonsense. I was at the historical commission meeting in question. I know how many members of the public spoke. I know what the commission members had to say. I also know how much engagement city staff has had one-on-one with many members of the public. And so the notion that this is somehow being rushed through is actually, in my opinion, a fairly typical complaint about process when you run out of substantive arguments. So with that, I guess we are now looking for motions to approve the ordinances. Is that?
Yes, there are 3 ordinances, and with the final ordinance, you can also find the CEQA language. You don't have to find it for each and every one, but it covers all 3 of them.
Okay, so I will look to my colleagues to make motions on these 3 ordinances and the final finding as well.
So
Councilmember Weinberg?
I'm willing to make the motion, but before I do, just to make sure that we have clarity, it sounds like there is not a consensus to change the 300-foot radius to expand that. Is that correct?
Sally, where are you on that?
I agree. I don't support expanding it beyond 300.
Okay. And then on the policy question, I think we are unanimous that the owner and only the owner. Is there agreement with my colleagues that it should be the entirety of the ownership?
Yes.
Okay.
City Council and Historic Commission, those 3?
Yes.
Yes.
Who can propose it?
Who can?
The city attorney, you're making sure that all 3 of the categories are included.
Yeah.
Owner, historical with concurrence by city
Property owner.
council, and then city council. Yes. Yes. So I think we're all in a unanimous agreement with that. Yes.
That all 3 of them can initiate it, or just one of them?
No, it was all 3. That's, yeah.
Any one of the 3.
Any one of the 3. It doesn't require all 3. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Because if Historic Commission decides they want to propose something, it still has to go to council to be thumbs up or thumb down.
But the entirety of the ownership of the property
Yeah.
has to agree to it for it to actually go on.
Okay.
Is that?
Let me say, strictly speaking, the city can declare something historical over the objections of the owner. We're not downtown Savannah, and so it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where that would make sense to Historical Commission or the City Council, but conceivably it's there, right? And that's sort of part of the law, in the same sense that the city can make zoning changes that the people who are affected by the zoning changes may or may not like, but that's within the power of the city, right? So that's what they're. I am unaware of any, in my involvement with it, any situation where the commission recommended designating something as historical over the objections of the owner. It never happened. On the contrary, what usually happened, or always happened, with the one exception was the district. We had a proposal for a historical district. The people in the district who were not recommending it were vehemently against it, and the Historical Commission declined to do it because of that, right? So the track record is that it doesn't happen. It's not consistent with the historic character of our town, in my opinion. But to be clear, just because we want to be clear, the ordinance does say that at least theoretically, the city council could declare something historical even if the owner didn't want it to be.
Okay, and that's where everyone is. That's what. Okay.
And you want to make sure that if the property is held in like 3 entities or something, all of them agree or all of them would participate? Because you say the entirety of the
Yes.
ownership.
Yeah, particularly if in the case, let me agree with me or disagree with me, but is the notion that if it's the owners who are proposing it, we would include that the paperwork to propose it would include some sort of words, from all of the ownership entities that they were on board with it, right? Because we don't want to be stuck with the weirdness of chasing around people who are fighting among themselves.
Precisely.
Yeah, that's the trust attorney coming
So the way this is structured, though, you could have somebody who owns 75% of a property still initiate this. They just go to the History Commission and say, hey, I only own 3/4 of this property, and the other owner is an absentee investor who doesn't have the heart for historical preservation, but I do, and I think this should be a historical resource.
But that just turns it into category 2.
Right.
Right. And
Ultimately,
comes down to
it comes to us no matter what.
Right. But to me, if it's category 1 where the owner is trying to initiate, which is the typical category, I would expect paperwork indicating that all the ownership interests are on board.
Great.
And then, Councilmember, if you could, just for whichever ordinances you are wanting to amend, just say as amended, or make a clarifying statement that that ordinance is amended.
Absolutely. Thank you for that reminder. And then I think there were 3 of us who didn't want to have the automatic rollover each year to extend the 10 years.
Sally, the contract provision that adds a year at the anniversary to the length of the contract.
Yes.
For new contracts, do you want to keep that provision?
I don't feel, I thought that was 2-2, but maybe I tallied it wrong. I am not willing, I don't think we have the information to understand the ramifications of making that change on the dais. I really don't. So I'm not willing to support that for tonight, because then I think that's a whole nother can of worms. I'm willing to put it as a thing for the general plan consultants to look into, but I'm not willing to support that tonight. We have no idea of what that will do.
Okay, so Mayor, I think you and I were in favor of not having it. I don't feel strongly enough that I would stop the proceedings tonight to do it. So I won't hold things up for that.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I mean,
Okay.
I don't feel strongly enough that, and to Councilmember Meadows' point, we will have another bite at the apple if need be.
Okay, and then the final point I think is Councilmember Meadows, I think made a compelling point about the blue lines. I agree with the argument that she made that we should not include the blue lines, but that's just the 2 of us. Is there a third vote for that?
I concur.
Okay. Is there anything else that we discussed that I didn't go over? Okay. Then with that, I move that the City Council adopt by title only and waive first reading of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Los Altos, adding Chapter 14.93, Historic Preservation, to the Los Altos Municipal Code as amended.
Second.
Councilmember Lang?
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows?
Yes.
Councilmember Weinberg?
Yes.
Mayor Daley?
Yes.
Motion carries with Vice Mayor Fliger recused. 4-0.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the City Council adopt by title only and waive first reading of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Los Altos, adding Chapter 14.95, Mills Act Program, to the Los Altos Municipal Code as amended.
Second.
Councilmember Lang?
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows?
Yes.
Councilmember Weinberg?
Yes.
Mayor Daley?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0 with Vice Mayor Fliger recused.
And Mr. Mayor, I move that the council adopt by title only and waive first reading of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Los Altos repealing in its entirety Chapter 12.44 for existing historic preservation regulations.
Second.
Councilmember Lang?
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows?
Yes.
Councilmember Weinberg?
Yes.
Mayor Daley?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0 with Vice Mayor Fliger recused.
And the CEQA exemption finding?
I think that's within each individual ordinance, isn't it?
Yes, if you could, somebody could just read it out for the record, that would be great.
Okay, I move that the council find that each of the 3 foregoing ordinances are categorically exempt from CEQA.
That was phrased as a motion, so can I have a second on that?
Second.
Councilmember Lang?
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows?
Yes.
Councilmember Weinberg?
Yes.
Mayor Daley?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0 with Vice Mayor Flagger recused.
Okay. We are now going to take a 10-minute break before we come back and start the discussion item number 8.
But just like I've never seen it like that. He was like texting. So anyway, we're it's not the safest part of town, right? Stop going classes freshman year because she
Do you know if Anthony is still here tonight?
I have not seen that. We are going to get started momentarily, everybody.
Howdy. Howdy, Mayor. That's fun. What do you think? So anyway, yes, yes. A little worried about this. Yeah. Well, you know, artists. Yeah, artist design. Yeah, design. So one is with I mean, I think they did like real.
No, he's a sergeant. He's a sergeant. No, I went to the San Jose Police Foundation.
Oh, the award ceremony.
Yes, yes. And so I went to the Police Foundation, and someone phoned and I was like, city councilor.
Steve Donahue, Captain Steve Donahue, bigger guy.
He was big.
Yes.
He goes, oh, I was like, I had no idea. I had no idea. That's awesome.
both started San Jose together, and then I left and came home and stayed. But yeah, that was his captain. We actually just went camping with him last weekend. We've been good friends with him for a very long time. So he was in honor, right?
Yes.
Wellness. Yeah, the wellness program. So
It was well done. It was my first time going. I got invited.
I've never been to it. I've never seen
We had 600 people. It was well done, well nice.
long.
Touching stories.
It was long.
Lots of awards.
It was long.
Lots of awards. We saw the list.
Okay. Did you set the same table as Sandra McGonigal? The superintendent was there as well.
Oh, no.
Okay, yeah, because she had told me she was going. She got invited by someone who bought a table, and I was like, that was a weird thing. Why are you going to San Jose? But she went for that.
I was at the L community table.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, but it was well done. Very nice. I didn't know about that.
Yes.
Okay, we need to get going. I've got high-paid folks standing around. Let's go. Yeah, there's that too, because I like to win.
Melissa. Everybody wins if it ends early. Everybody wins.
I like that.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Did you tell her you were for imprint certain? Okay, so now on our agenda is item number 8. It's a discussion item, program implementation, drone as a first responder, and I'm going to turn it over to Captain Kraus.
Okay, thank you for having us today. So I'm going to go through the drone as a first responder program. I know 4 out of 5 of you, I think, went to the demos, and others of you probably already understand the program. So I'm going to start this discussion with an event that actually just happened a week ago, and that was a missing child report that came in on September 23rd. So what basically happened in this call is that a family last saw their 8-year-old child sleeping on the couch in the living room, and that was at 5 a.m. When they came back through the living room at 7:15, the child was no longer on the couch, and they couldn't locate him. What they did locate was some notes on the coffee table with some sad faces on it and a calendar with a bunch of X's on it all the way through Halloween. And he said, "I will not see you again till Halloween." And the 8-year-old was not in the residence. He was not at the school because the parents did a little bit of searching first before they called the police, which happened just after 8 a.m. The family did provide areas that he liked to frequent. He likes the library, he likes McDonald's, he likes Almond Park, he goes to a Taekwondo studio on El Camino. So we all obviously pull all our resources together to go try to find this 8-year-old child that is missing. So we got the call, the report at 8:24. We had rapid deployment of personnel, including myself was out there looking, in addition to our motors units and all our patrol units were out trying to find this child. We had a total of 11 personnel out. Luckily, it was a weekday where we have additional personnel. The drone was requested fairly early. Now, this is our current drone program. The issue was that our motors units were out trying to find this child. In addition, they were doing school enforcement. So that was who our drone operator happened to be that day. The pilot was our motor sergeant. So it took him the time to get back to the police department through traffic in school hours, pick up our drone, drive back to the scene, and then get ready to launch the drone to try to find this missing child. So the drone was eventually launched at 8:53, and the child was located by an officer on scene, not the drone, at 8:54 a.m. So we had the kid was missing for about an hour and a half, though we were only looking for a short time for him, but the drone did take approximately 30 minutes to get launched, simply because of the time it took for the pilot to get back, get the drone and a spotter, which we'll talk about a little later, and get back to the scene. So I wanted to start with that because I think it is a good way to highlight why we're asking for the drone as a first responder program. So our current drone program that you guys approved a couple years ago, we have 2 drones, and those are operated by pilots. They have their Part 107 licenses. They have to go to a 1-week class. They have to pass a pretty intensive test. And we have 7 current pilots right now, including some sworn, some non-sworn, including record staff, and 2 dispatchers. So what do we use the drone for currently? Search and rescue. If we had a collision that we need to get footage of from above, we have assisted other agencies with locating dead bodies in a marsh. We've used it for public works to do some roof inspections, and we can use it for crime scene documentation. We currently have very strict policies on privacy, transparency, and all of our data logs are all posted online currently, and we have audits with that as well. Our deployment on that obviously is reactive. So it's not like it's going out proactively and doing any kind of surveillance of anybody. We're not putting it up just to wander around Los Altos and see what crime may be afoot. That's not how our policy reads. And it also is currently limited by the availability of trained staff. The drone right now requires you to be a trained Part 107 pilot. It requires you to contact Moffett Airfield before you can even launch it and get permission to launch. And then it does require a spotter. So you have 1 pilot, and then you have a secondary person there as a spotter to make sure there's no interference for the drone. The drone has to be launched from the scene. So basically, the drone has to be within eyesight of the operator at all times. So you can't launch it from the police department and send it across down to Montclair School, because it wouldn't be line of sight anymore. So that's not permissible. So that's our current drone program we have right now. So our recommendation of what we're asking council for tonight is that you would authorize staff to move forward with the development and implementation as a drone as a first responder. We call it DFR program. And the reason we would want this is to enhance our emergency response capabilities, increase our situational awareness, and also promote public safety as well for officers and for our residents. I'm going to show a short DFR demonstration video. It has no sound on it. It's just the visual. And that's for anybody who possibly did not attend the demo, or for our public here who obviously did not attend the demos, just for them to kind of understand what it is. So basically what happens is there is a drone located in a dock, like an egg that opens up. The drone is launched when a dispatcher launches it from our current computer-aided dispatch system. The drone flies automatically to the scene of an incident. It is then taken over by a pilot, and it gives live feed information. So you're going to see all that in this quick video. And at the end, it returns to its dock to recharge, ready to be launched a second time. So we're going to go through a little bit about what a drone as first responder program is and what it isn't. For the drone as first responder program, like I said, it is integrated into the computer-aided dispatch system. And so PD staff may deploy the drone immediately after designated 911 calls or emergency calls. It's used for in-progress calls that are currently happening. It's not going to be used for a cold call or, hey, somebody was in my neighborhood an hour ago and they, broke the window to my car, but they're not here anymore. We're not going to use a drone for anything that's not currently happening where it could be useful for that. So it's sent immediately. Like I said, the drone flies immediately to the incident. There is a misconception that drones would be capturing footage on the way to these calls and invading the privacy of our residents. However, the drone flies with the camera at a 45-degree angle, so it's actually just catching the sky as it's flying to a scene in order to protect the privacy. the camera drops down. When it gets within a range of the call, you can set that parameter of how far away from the call that camera starts to lower, so it'll start capturing footage, but it is not flying with the camera down on the way to the incidents. It drops as it approaches the scene. It's integrated with dispatch for a rapid response, so we don't have to wait for the drone operator to come back and launch it. The drones often do arrive before police, fire, or EMS. That does not mean that officers are not en route as well. So that's not the design of the program. The program is designed that the drone is launched out, it's going to head there. It likely will get there quicker simply because it doesn't have to deal with traffic and school zones or any of those things. It goes overhead and starts capturing live feed for the people, the officers who are still responding. So it's giving them situational awareness before they even arrive on scene. The pilot who is monitoring it from their device is providing that information over the radio to the responding officers so they know what they're going to be seeing when they get there. It does provide live feed to the responding units and to the dispatchers as well, so they can provide the information to the officers. And it also can help with proper resource allocation. I did say that officers would be dispatched as well. However, there might be a time where our officers are tied up on calls and we get another call in of something rapidly evolving or some crime that's happening currently. We can send the drone to that call and then see what is actually going on there and then decide if we need to pull an officer off their current call to respond or not. So the drone can respond to a call if officers are unavailable, and it will help us determine resource allocation. Maybe they should break off their car, stop their doing, and go break off and go to this call that's coming out that the drone is monitoring overhead. The GFR programs right now are used successfully in Campbell, Atherton, which is a city very close to our size, Elk Grove, Vacaville. In addition, it is also being launched in Fairfield as a new city that just got DFR programs. So just a comparison between our current drone program and a DFR program. The current program is reactive and happens post-incident. The DFR program is also reactive. We're not out there flying around with that drone looking for, possible crimes that may be about to occur. It is reactive, however, it's more of an immediate response. We don't have to wait the 30 minutes for that missing child. It can be seconds for it to deploy. The current program does require that on-site person with the drone with line of sight. DFR program gets special licenses through the FAA that allows BVLOS, which is beyond visual line of sight. So the pilot does not have to be within the line of sight and they can fly it remotely. The FAA gives licenses to the department, and then you can train whoever you choose to within the department. So we would choose to train certain personnel to be the pilots, but they could fly it from their desktop. The other benefit to the DFR program is that if I'm flying it, for example, from my desktop, I have 2 giant monitors that I would be able to see with what the drone is seeing, and I can relay that information. With the current drone program, they're flying it on a little screen, similar to the size of your phone. That's the image that they're getting for the drone footage. So it's very hard to see a wide range of what's going on, to see where a missing child might be hiding, or where a suspect may have run off to when you have a small screen to look at, as opposed to having the large screen inside the dispatch center or anybody's desktop. The current program has very limited dispatch integration. It's not integrated into our CAD system, whereas the DFR is completely integrated into our 911 system. And it is currently used for investigations post-incident, and our DFR will be used for call response and immediate assessment. So some of the benefits of the DFR program, like I said, faster response times. A lot of times they arrive in under 2 minutes. So looking at our calls for service, our highest call volumes right now at our police department are from 8 to 10 a.m. and then again from 2 to 3 p.m. And then our next highest call volume is 7 to 8 p.m. So that's when we get the most calls for service. If you think about those times, that also coincides with our commute traffic and our school zone traffic. So during the times we get the highest call for service, the traffic is the heaviest. So it does take our officers a longer time to respond during those time frames simply because of the amount of traffic during those times. So the drone would be able to have faster response times. It gives us enhanced situational awareness because it gives us live video of a situation, which improves community and officer safety. So I think this is the #1 benefit that our police department feels council should know about, is the improved community and officer safety. I'm going to share a couple quick incidents to highlight where the drone as first responder could have assisted us in 2 calls that happened. The first one happened, we had a incident, there was a caller driving by, saw a person on the side of the street at Springer and Springer Terrace. And so what happened there is that it was on January 2nd of this year. The caller stated a possible Hispanic male adult, gave a clothing description. He believed his subject pulled out a black handgun and was pointing it at passing cars. So that was the call that we got. So officers did arrive on scene. We did initiate a 1096, which is a high-risk pedestrian stop, which means our officers get out of the car. We do order the suspect at gun. We take out our guns because we assume he has a gun. And then we do give him commands to drop any weapon he may have, kneel down on the ground, put his hands behind him, and then we take him into custody. What ended up happening in that case is that as soon as the officers arrived on scene and started giving him commands, and he went down into the kneeling position, he fainted. And he fell on the ground and actually hit his head on the ground. He just panicked. Officers didn't even touch him. They were just giving him verbal commands. It ended up that he didn't have a gun on him at all. He had a cell phone. He had a cell phone. Now, to the credit of the passerby, for whatever reason, the individual was taking a cell phone out of his pocket quickly and pointing it at cars and then putting it back, almost like he was drawing a gun, and he was doing it repeatedly. But when they got on scene, there was no gun. It was just a cell phone, and the subject did admit that he was just using his cell phone. He didn't have a reason for why he was doing that. If we had drone as first responder that could have gone overhead and seen the subject pulling out his cell phone in that manner and pointing it at cars, our officers likely would not have even had to respond to that because there is no criminal activity there. Could they have still responded and talked to him, make sure he was not in mental crisis? Absolutely. Would it have been a 1096 where we had a high-risk pedestrian stop? It wouldn't have been, because we would have known that the cell phone is what he was taking out and pointing at cars. So it would have changed the way we approach that situation. A second call that we had was in Village Court, actually just 1 week later. It was on January 8th of this year. A subject called from Village Court, which is a shopping center on San Antonio Road, and he said he was going to shoot himself. He said he was located in a Tesla in the parking lot, and officers arrived on scene. They obviously took a distance from the vehicle. We had to close down San Antonio Road, so just in case he did have a gun, there was no threat to any of the passing vehicles. We tried to negotiate with him for quite a long time. Eventually, they did get him safely detained. However, there was no gun. He had said he had a gun to his head. There was no gun in his vehicle at all. He was placed on a 5150 hold. It was a 50-minute call that we were out on trying to negotiate with the individual. It was 7 personnel that were attached to that scene for that time period. So if the drone could have been on scene and given us the intelligence of did he have a gun in his hand? Did he have a gun in his car? What was the range of where the officers should safely position themselves in order to negotiate with him? All that information could have potentially either had us not have to respond to the call or respond differently than we did because we would have been aware that there was not a gun, or at least we could have positioned our officers in a more safe manner. So if the drone could prevent the loss of potentially one life, we hear about it all the time where officers arrive on scene, they're told someone has a gun, they might pull out something that resembles a gun, or they had something in their hand, nighttime resembles a gun, and officers unfortunately have used force in those situations, not our officers, but the drone as first responder can also work at the nighttime, so we could prevent some of those incidents from happening. So some of the challenges and considerations that we are aware of, obviously, we need to make sure there's transparency. We do have the portal already that shows all of the data flights, and all of the DFR programs do have the data flights available for the public to see. FAA compliance, there are the beyond visual line of sight waivers that are issued from the FAA in order to use these drones safely. The drones also have built-in safety devices, so basically if there's any interference of any passing aircraft that's in the air, then the drone will automatically lower if the pilot is not aware that those things occur. The drone safely lowers itself to the ground until those things pass. Those are the self-mitigating features, but there also is, you can get a radar system installed, but they also put something on the computer that lets you know what the flight paths are in your area at the time, so you know what other aircraft might be in the area. So that would be the safety of it, is in the drone and the infrastructure. And then obviously the operational infrastructure is another challenging consideration. We would have to determine what the best location would be. the appropriate number of the drones and the docking stations, and just to make sure that the video systems and the data is secure. So the fiscal impact of this, the estimated annual cost for a DFR program is approximately $100,000 a year, which covers the FAA licensing, the pilot training, and the docking infrastructure in the drone. Vendors that we have started looking at, just so you know, they do have a replacement program in place. So if at any time the government outlaws the foreign-made drones, they will replace it with an American-made drone at no cost. So that is integrated into the program. The year one funding was already appropriated into our current fiscal year budget, so there's no additional appropriation required at this time. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Captain Kraus. So I'm going to go to my colleagues for questions, and then we'll go to the public for comment. I'm going to start the question with an example. There was a call for burglary in progress on 2nd Street several months back. And the call came in from one of the residents in the condo building who saw the suspects in somebody's condo. Unfortunately, you know, getting across San Antonio can be problematic, and it took a little while for an officer to get to the scene. And by that time, the suspects had already left. And there were eyewitness accounts that indicated the suspects got into some kind of a van, but the witness accounts weren't sufficient to identify the vehicle. Now, if we had a DFR program in place, it seems to me like there's a good chance the drone might have been on site fast enough to actually capture a license plate and then work in conjunction with our license plate readers and allow us to basically catch the suspects simply because of that improvement in response time and the data capture capability that the drone would add. Do you think that's a likely, is that something that we may see play out? Am I describing a setting that is a good value proposition for the drone?
It is, and especially with a lot of our burglaries that happen in homes where maybe they're interrupted, the suspect runs out from the backyard, or even we have a house where someone says, hey, my alarm went off, and ask officers to go check the house for them. Well, our officers will do the best they can to get into the rear yards to check around the whole vicinity, but if those gates are locked, they will not be jumping fences or breaking down gates just to go and check and see if the rear of your house has been broken into. Now, if the gate is unlocked, we certainly will do a whole 360 check. The drone could do that. The drone could fly over the backyard and see, is there any broken windows there that we could assume there has been possibly burglars inside? Or like you said, if they are fleeing and the drone's there within, 7 to 80 seconds is what the average time would be, depending on the placement of the drones, they could, in theory, catch that suspect leaving, catch the vehicle leaving. Now, just to be aware, there are safety mechanisms in place. So if that vehicle flees before officers can get on scene, the drone, you can geofence around our city, right? Because if we got permission to fly it in our city, it doesn't mean we have permission to fly it in Palo Alto or Mountain View. And so the drone would stop at the borders of our city. The camera could continue to get footage of where that vehicle is heading just by stopping in our city and getting continued camera footage until they get out of that range. But that at least gives officers information about which direction of travel the vehicle is going, so we can notify Palo Alto and Mountain View of the vehicle, the license plate, and what direction of travel they're in.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Captain Kraus, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you very much for the individual sessions that you offered to each of us. I enjoyed the one that I had, and I'm sorry I had to rush afterwards. I had a whole bunch of thoughts. I wasn't able to write them down, but I'm glad that we had this presentation. Assuming that the council authorizes moving forward with the DFR program, is there a new policy with regard to the drone usage and the data they collect that that the city would have to adopt, or are existing policies already in place that would cover it?
So we would have to come back to council with a modification to our drone policy, which really comes back to council simply because it would be a change to our AB 481 military equipment use policy. We have looked at what that policy change would be. It would likely just need to be one sentence, one added usage that would allow us to use the drone for this purpose. in order to facilitate responding to calls for service. And so, yes, we would have to come back to council with that change to the drone policy and to our military equipment use, which in addition, we would have to come back and ask for allocation of the 2 additional drones, because that would have to be added to our current inventory potentially. So yes, we would.
Okay, great. And what about the use of the data, the storage of data, and the use of that data? Would that be covered by our existing policies?
It would be covered by our existing policy, yes.
So we keep it generally for about 30 days, unless there's a legal reason to keep it for a longer period of time.
Yes, so if there was any footage that was connected to a case as evidence, then that footage would be downloaded into our evidence.com system to be held for longer than the 30 days, but it would not be in the cloud or anywhere else after 30 days. That would all be gone.
And if another jurisdiction wanted to look at that data, they would follow the same process as the ALPR data?
No, it's not something that can be requested by other agencies. It's not the same as that. The footage, so an agency can't put in a request and say, we want to see your drone footage for this incident type. Absolutely not. They would have to go through other ways to get about that, which have to be likely through a subpoena or a case that's existing, not just, hey, we want to see your drone footage from this day and this time. So it's not the same as the request for LPR data.
Okay. If a drone is deployed and is observing someone moving, and they cross the city boundaries, can the drones cross over into another jurisdiction and continue to operate? So it stops at the city limit.
The drone itself would be geofenced to not cross the city line. Now the camera can go upwards. I believe it's 300 yards it can capture. So it can stop at the city line and continue to get footage for up to 300 yards into the next city, but we don't have authorization to fly the drone outside of our city limits.
Okay. And it's my understanding that the police department is recommending that we use Flock as the service provider for the drones. Is that correct?
We are still looking at the different vendors. Our plan is to come back to council on October 28th with a recommended vendor for council's approval. So at this time, we're just looking for an approval of a drone as first responder program. There are multiple vendors that do offer the drone as first responder. So we will come back with which vendor we are recommending in October.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor. I have no other questions.
Councilmember Meadows.
Thank you. Just one question, I think. So these drones, or these types of drones, obviously are through a program or a police supportive program, are not available to the public. But are these level of drones available to someone from the public if they were willing to spend the money?
I believe so. I don't actually know the answer to that question. It's the same drones we have right now. Those are the exact same drones that are in these docks. I am not sure if the public can buy the exact drone that we have or not. So I don't have an answer on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Captain Krause, and to the chief and the rest of the team that was able to do the demo session for me yesterday. Similar to Councilmember Weinberg, I enjoyed it thoroughly, learned a lot, and really appreciated getting that demo session before today's meeting. So I want to pick up on the DFR program question that Councilmember Weinberg asked. And I know staff isn't recommending a particular vendor tonight, but should we assume that all the features that were described tonight, all the different DFR programs would have them? Like, were you describing features specific to a particular vendor, or should we assume that all vendors would have these features?
So the vendors we've looked at share most of those features. The one feature that not every vendor has is the integration with their computer-aided dispatch system. So basically, there are some vendors that will have a separate window that's the DFR window, so that in the case that you want to send the drone, with some vendors, you have to copy the address of the incident and paste it into that and then launch the drone, because the drone cannot be integrated into our current computer-aided dispatch system. So that's the only change, is that the dispatchers would have to copy and paste the address before they launch the drone. So the integration is specific to the one vendor that you guys were seeing. But as far as the other features, the mitigating features, all the safety features, the licensing is the same with all vendors.
Okay, thank you. And then with regards to the example you gave at Village Court with the Tesla,
Yes.
just to better understand how the drone would operate, if an individual is in the car, windows up, would the drone really be able to determine whether or not the person sitting in the car has a weapon? I was trying to unfollow that scenario. I understand if he was outside, but if he was inside the car, would the drone really be able to detect that?
The drone can zoom in pretty well. So through the front windshield, obviously if windows are tinted from the side, same as the officers, we're not going to be able to see in with the drone. But from the front windshield, you have a pretty good view, and you can manipulate the angle of the camera in order to capture as much as you possibly can. Now, can we guarantee that he doesn't have a gun at his feet? No. But when he's telling dispatch he has a gun in his hand, he has a gun to his head, then we would be able to know that from the drone footage whether or not that was accurate.
Okay. And then on the policy piece, and I'll bring this up again in discussion depending on the direction we go, but on the policy piece, regardless of the vendor we decide to go with, it sounds like the policy proposal coming from staff may be limited. And even though it's not similar to the automated license plate readers, any concern if we still wanted to include things in the policy that made clear about how we share data? Not that I know it's different, but how the data is shared, any concern there and how it's used. So for example, again, with the ALPR data, we made sure we had limited access to controls and the data. Any concerns there with having similar policies related to the drone? No. Okay. Because the example you gave, so for example, the drone is deployed, it sounds like you'll have more eyes on the drone and using the drone, the person in the car, the person back in the PD office. And so I just want to make sure, yes, we want as many officers having access and visibility, but then still be able to limit it so it doesn't get abused.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So who makes the decision to deploy the drone when a call comes in? Is it dispatcher?
It can be made by dispatch. It can be made potentially by an officer, a sergeant, a captain, the chief can make the determination and come on the radio and say, deploy the drone. So if the dispatch has not deployed the drone for whatever reason, you could come on the radio, anybody working, and request that the drone be deployed to a certain call.
Here's my concern.
Yes.
Maybe we have a situation where an officer has something going on in their personal life and they have the poor judgment to, want to misuse the drone to fly over their mistress's house or something like that. How do we prevent that?
Well, the drone.
And it's not a joke. I mean,
Yeah.
this happens.
I thought you were going to use a different example. Sorry.
So, I mean, that could certainly, to be honest with you, that is more of a risk with the current drone program we have than the drone as first responder, right? Because the current drone program is reactive, but it's not tied to our computer-aided dispatch system at all. So a drone operator could go out with the drone if they chose to violate our policy, because that wouldn't be allowed, and launch the drone, and likely other people may not even know until the flight logs were logged in. With drone as first responder, the drone only operates from a call for service. So there has to be a call for service on the screen for that drone to be launched. We couldn't just launch the drone and then just randomly fly it around someplace. It's tied to the calls for service. So I think that would be the way that would be prevented, is because it's tied to a call.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is simply that the DFR program actually increases accountability.
It does, and all the flight logs with both vendors, or all the vendors we've looked at, the flight logs get put up there. It doesn't give the exact call that it was, but it'll give the call type: domestic violence, suspicious person. It'll give the time the drone was in the air, and so that anybody in the public can look and say, hey, I heard a drone over my house earlier today, and go and look online and see, oh, it was flying to this call 2 streets over, which was a suspicious vehicle call. So they'd be able to know exactly what that drone was flying to by looking at the dashboard.
Councilmember Lang, do you have some questions?
Yeah, I love the idea of going to the edge of the city. It reminds me of Dukes of Hazzard or something like that. So are you familiar with the ACLU case against Sonoma County and their drone use?
I am not.
Okay. It's very different. It was code enforcement people who took an excess interest in code enforcing hot tubs. And so it's very different.
Yes.
But I would anticipate, because it has received some publicity, that questions from
Yeah.
the public might come up about it. So it would be good to prepare in a sort of an FAQ sense how different this is. Just
I do know a recent one in the news was San Ramon recently used their drone to catch a robbery. It was in the news, and the drone was able to identify the suspects and aid in the capture of those robbery suspects.
yeah,
So-
certainly the home. I was glad to hear the answer to the home robbery thing, because I think that's a thing that many residents will be very interested in.
Yeah.
So,
Captain,
okay.
there was that, since we're talking about bad cases and stuff, there was the public records case, and I think it was from down south, but the drone was filming from the very beginning, and I may have the facts a little off, but the court determined that all that footage wasn't going to be investigatory. So I know it was just a real bad case for.
It may be, and that, I mean, part
That
of the
might be
reason
why
that
you have a different policy. Yeah.
why you fly with it up until you get close to the scene, so you're not flying and capturing unnecessary footage of anything. So basically, once you're on scene, that's when it lowers and starts capturing the footage,
Yeah,
just
and
to
that's
prevent that.
That's very similar to body-worn camera.
Yes.
Where you press the button when you engage. You don't walk around all the time.
We don't walk around
filming.
the cameras all the time. When we get out of our cars, we double tap, which turns the camera on. We record during the duration, and then we turn it off at the end. Yes, similar to that. Yes, ma'am.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Lang's question brought up another question for me with regards to how long has this particular DFAR program been in existence? So for example, in Atherton, and the reason I'm asking, going back to just our experience with ALPRs, I remember 2 years ago, it was all positive reviews, right? It's doing all these amazing things in these different cities that we benchmarked, and of course, for different reasons, we supported it. And then fast forward to this past year where the news about its usage was not so good. We were hearing about abuses, misuse. And so I'm just curious, how long has this program been in existence in Atherton and these other cities, just to figure out, yes, it may be doing really well right now, but has it been in existence long enough to see maybe the downsides or challenges with them?
I don't have the exact date. Southern California, it started earlier. Redondo Beach was an early adopter, and Chula Vista PD both adopted, I want to say 2 years ago, and started drone as first responder programs down there. I believe Atherton has been in the last year. Vacaville, I think, just came on about 4 months ago, and Elk Grove PD has had it for at least 6 months. This is a new technology. I'll be very honest with you. We're excited at the police department simply because we've always been, historically, on the tail end of technology when it comes in. We get technologies after cities have had it for 5-10 years, and we buy it, and then it becomes obsolete very quickly afterwards. This would be an opportunity for us to be on the forefront of technology. Yes, could there be issues that come up with other cities, just like with our LPR cameras? Other cities have seen abuses. I don't believe we have. I believe our policies are very strong. Our audits are very strong. Our audit histories are very strong. And I'd like to think that our DFR program would be similar in that we could be an example for other cities and how to do it correctly.
Okay, if there's no other questions right now, we'll go to public comment.
We have 2 speaker cards.
Okay, 3 minutes each, please.
The first speaker is Brian Jones.
Good evening. There are pros and cons to any advanced technology, and this council has worked hard to balance our rights to privacy and free assembly with legitimate law enforcement needs. I'm really excited to see you guys already engaging in that work tonight. Like the ALPRs, I think the questions of those pros and cons are nuanced, they're difficult, and I commend you all for taking that seriously, and I urge you to continue to dig into these important issues. There's one aspect of this I think that's not nuanced, and that is the participation of Flock as a vendor. We've seen Flock ride roughshod over our carefully written policies. I think you all have seen the analysis that I did that says that there have been hundreds of unauthorized agencies, over 100 unauthorized agencies accessing our ALPR data. That's not our fault. It's not the fault of our policies. It's not the fault of our police department. It's the fault of Flock allowing these sorts of things to happen. In addition, they ran as I think you all know, they ran a secret program with Customs and Border Patrol where they shared information from systems without telling the law enforcement agencies that was being done. This past week in Evanston, Illinois, where they canceled their Flock contract, they had Flock take the cameras down. Flock came back and put them up again without authorization. The city of Evanston, Illinois issued a cease and desist letter and had to go out and wrap the cameras in plastic. I can give you the news article if you're interested. Flock is not a trustworthy company. And I think we can't rely on just assurances and pinky promises that they're going to do better this time. More broadly speaking, whenever we're looking at a new technology tool like this, we have to think about cybersecurity. There's two ways that we can achieve that cybersecurity. Human factors, where we use policies, norms, laws, oversights to make sure that people are making good choices. And technological factors, where we make it technologically difficult or impossible to break those rules. Technological factors are generally safer. Usually cybersecurity breaks down with people, not with the technology. In the case of the drone system, like our current one, we store all of that video locally. It's very difficult for someone to sneak in and steal that data. I don't know the details, but I suspect that the video from the Flock version of this system will go through Flock servers. And if that video goes through their servers, there's no way to know that it didn't all come back to us, right? There's no way to know if someone else checked in on that. We can have policies in place that can make pinky promises that they won't do that, but we've already seen them violate those promises. All systems are going to have a mix of both of these methods, and understanding the effectiveness of any mix requires expertise. I would urge the council to consult expertise on this matter. Get an independent cybersecurity expert to come in and assess whatever system we think we want to get, and make sure that it's a system that is designed to encourage compliance with policy. Crucially, in this day and age, insist that it minimizes connection to statewide and nationwide databases that can be co-opted by outside agencies. We've seen that happen. I remember the days, and so do you, when you could count on most agencies and quite a few companies to do the right thing because it was the right thing. Sadly, that's no longer the world we live in. As the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So shame on Flock for fooling us once, but now let's not get fooled again.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Pierre Bedard.
Thank you. So I came for the consent calendar and I stayed for the drone discussion. I'm speaking as a private citizen and not as a commissioner before, and so thank you for letting me speak. I've been a victim. I didn't publicize it. Many of you know what happened and where we had to have a police response at my house. And I got to tell you, a drone would have helped. And I live on the outskirts, literally on the Mountain View border. So policing those areas are particularly a problem. And to have a drone just come up and assess what was going on and deal with it would have been good. We have a lot of challenges along the El Camino corridor. And I think we spoke about the 911 system. What happened to me when I was trying to call 911 and all the cell towers and where I was set. But I really believe this is the way to go within limits. And I just wanted to come up here and say that as a citizen, I can see where, this is well worthwhile. I do have some questions. One, how will we know that it's a police drone? I worry about, we right now, it was weird. I saw the drone come up while I was doing books. It just came up right from behind the police station. And I was thinking, my God, how many more are going to come up? You've got Amazon, you've got Neuro. Stop. Too much. The other thing too, will it have IR cameras? Or is just a analog camera really what we're looking at? Is there going to be a review board that looks at the use of these things that's independent from the police department? I know we have systems in place, but it was brought out, it's not the systems and the cybersecurity systems that fail, it's the people. And I want to, what Brian was talking about, I just wanted to give a shout out to somebody that some of you know, Tomoki Chen, who broke the story about ICE coming into flock databases for the San Francisco Standard. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out. But overall, I'm extremely supportive. This is good stuff. There's going to be confusion. It's going to hit next door. People are going to see drones flying around and wonder what's going on. But you know what? It'll help the city overall, especially in the hinterlands. So thank you.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to council for deliberation. Look in either direction to see if there's a colleague who wants to start us off. Councilmember Lang.
Thank you very much for the very helpful presentation and for the work of getting us set up in Brown Act compliant opportunities to look at the system ahead of time. That was very helpful. I think, particularly because the question before us tonight is are we generally supportive and do we want to investigate it? There'll be more concrete decisions coming. I certainly am very supportive of exploring this because I think it addresses two high priorities for our residents. One was discussed, which is burglaries. It's the number one that when you talk to residents about crimes that concern them, household burglaries are important with that, and considering how quickly those burglars try to get in and out, being able to be on scene quickly, I think would be a very valuable thing. And then the other one that people don't talk about as much, but I also think is very important, is if people in the community are having some sort of crisis or mental break, it feels like it could keep everybody safer, including the person, maybe especially the person, right? And our ability to rise to that challenge and keep everybody safer in a land awash with guns would be a very valuable thing indeed. I want to thank Mr. Jones in particular. These things are serious business in terms of our civil liberties, and knowing that we have residents who take that as seriously as I do and are thinking about it and writing to us about it is very valued, and not the most glamorous thing to be here this late at night, but in all seriousness, I deeply and truly appreciate citizens being vigilant about their liberties. So thank you for doing that. And that's all I have to say.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, for all the work that went into bringing this to us today. Thank you to our two members of the public who spoke. Overall, I largely agree with Councilmember Lang. I think that this is a technology that can do a lot of good. And I'm in favor of moving forward with it. But there are three caveats isn't the right word, but three points that I want to make. The first is if the police are going to recommend that we use flock, I would like to know a little. I'd like to have maybe a deeper understanding of why we want to use flock for several reasons. Number one, it means that we're using flock, I think, for just about all as our vendor for all of our services of this nature. Is that good? Is that bad? I mean, what happens if flock goes out of business? Does that mean we have none of these tools available? So I'd like to know about that. But also, flock has been in the news, properly so, for some very bad reasons, some very concerning reasons. And I don't know if the failures of flock are the same for other possible vendors, and then flock is just the one that's getting all the attention. I just don't know, but they've been in the news, and it's been serious enough that I would like to know why the police are recommending we use flock if you believe that flock is the best vendor to use. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't support using flock, but I think that I'll need kind of a more compelling reason to go with flock as opposed to another vendor, if all else was equal. I think that Mr. Jones brought up an excellent point. The second caveat, again, I don't know if it's a caveat, but we're talking about adopting a technology at the forefront. Captain Krause, you mentioned that, and I'm glad that you did. And it's exciting to think that we might be doing that, and it means that we really could set standards that the rest of cities in the Bay Area and California could follow. It's also an opportunity to screw things up And we'd rather be remembered as the ones who did it right, not the ones who did it wrong. The idea of hiring a cybersecurity expert to help make sure that we don't just have the right policies in place, but that the policies actually can, not that they have teeth, but that the mechanisms that we have support the policies that we have, I think would be useful. And I don't know how realistic it is to be able to find a cybersecurity expert to do something like that, or some other kind of expert. But if there is an expert that's available to help the city put something in place, and I would imagine that there probably is, because we're not talking about someone looking at data that we've already collected through the police process. We're looking at installing a new technological system. And I know that it is common, certainly in the corporate world, and I think in the world of government too, to make sure that you have the experts in place that you need to make sure that you have the best security, the best technology in place to accomplish your goals. So Mr. Jones-Sake, I think that was an excellent idea. And if that was an option, I certainly would be supportive of staff hiring someone who could give us an extra expert report. And I think that would be useful for the community at large as well. I think that the public and the council would appreciate hearing about any reports or findings that they make, or any challenges that they identify. And then the third point, Mr. Bedard, I think, also had an interesting idea about some kind of a review board. And I haven't thought it through yet. It was first mentioned by Mr. Bedard just now. I'm just, it is percolating in my mind. We don't have a police commission. I don't think that we need a police commission. But to the extent that there is anything more than the portal that we can have to assure that the public, that all this data, all these images that are being collected meet the standards that we have set for the collection and management of that data, I think that can only be a good thing. I'm not looking for an oversight board that will be poking in every single nook and cranny of what the police are doing, but certainly some kind of public input to ensure that our policies are being met and the technology is such that it supports those policies, I think would be useful. So with that, thank you very much.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't repeat what Councilmember Lang and Weinberg have already said, because I'm in general agreement with their position about moving this forward. Just two things to add. If this comes back, I think the proposed date is October 28th. I would appreciate a broader approach in the policy that's brought back. Even just what Councilmember Weinberg said, I know with the ALPRs, we have an audit. I can't remember where we ended up the last time. It was an external audit or internal audit, but we have had an extensive discussion related to the ALPRs that I think whatever policies we adopted for the ALPRs, I'd like to see those brought back in the context of approving a drone program. I think Captain Krause had said, maybe we would just update the military equipment use policy by adding these two new drones, but I would like to see a broader approach to adopting a policy that's more robust and reflective. There's the word robust, Jolie. That reflects the things we're discussing and the concerns that we have related to the use of this technology. Also, we talk about being a leader in the space. I will say, and to Captain Krause's point, that we've had such a good policy and PD staff that have followed our policy. And so we have not run amok of the policy or the laws. And so we're very grateful that our team here is doing what we expect them to do. But we've been leaders in the sense that I know when we adopted our policy, at least 2 other cities in the Bay Area looked at our policy as a starting point when they were drafting their policy. And so I want to make sure that we continue to be leaders in the space. And so looking at the policy to make sure it addresses all these issues, I think will be better for our city. It will be better for PD staff and also neighboring cities who look to us for things like this, especially if we're first adopters. And then the last point I wanted to make on the selection of the vendor, again, similar to Councilmember Weinberg, I'm not going to weigh in tonight on who the vendor should be because I'm not part of the, evaluation review process. But I will say you've heard some concerns expressed tonight about a particular vendor. And so if for whatever reason staff is going to come back and recommend that vendor, I hope these issues and concerns that have been raised about this vendor are addressed. And therefore, there's sufficient justification to move forward with this vendor. And if it's an RFP, whatever that process looks like, make sure the criteria is clear and the expectations are clear on what we expect from the vendor if they're going to do business with Los Altos. Thanks.
Councilmember Meadows.
Thank you. So the short version is I largely agree with what my colleagues have been saying and building on each other. I will make a couple of separate points. One, I would like you offered to provide a link to this, frankly, incredible tale that a vendor would scurry up the poles, put back on cameras that their contract, has been canceled on, and then go off in the dead of night. And, I find that incredible, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. So please do send that, because I'm sure we'd all be interested in reading that tale. I definitely agree with our policies. Everything everyone said about let's look at it, let's make it as tight as we can. In some senses, I think this is a little easier to control than the ALPRs. And we can look at that policy and translate it. There's probably a lot of overlap, and it shouldn't be that hard. But ALPRs are everywhere throughout the city. They're looking at license plates, it's cameras, cars go through, and there's a lot of there's a lot of chaff for a little bit of wheat. Whereas with this drone program, you're essentially going after what has a much higher potential versus every license plate that goes by a reader. This has a much higher potential of actually being an incident that you're going to have a vested interest in public safety. So I think that speaks well of the program, especially with ending at city boundaries, even though the camera has more visibility, 300 feet or something, whatever you said it was. So I think that this is by itself more likely to be a safer program than ALPRs. I do want to point out, and the one question that I asked of the captain, so residents have their own ALPRs, as we know, some of them do, and residents are going to have and do have drones, whether they're supposed to use them in any which way, but they do and they can. So to pick up on what Mr. Bedard mentioned, maybe ours need little flashing blue lights on them so that we know they're police. No, that's sort of facetious, but in both ALPRs and drones, there are civilian equipment out there. And so both how do we distinguish between that, but also how do we know that actually, I feel like with our ALPR policies, whether the vendor chooses to follow them or not, we hold ourselves to a higher standard than any resident with an ALPR. They don't have to hold themselves to any standard other than their own. And that certainly applies to drone usage. So anything we're talking about in terms of whether it be ALPRs or drones, we're going to be being as careful as we can. And the general public does not have to be. So it really doesn't matter whether it's the exact drone or not. It's just that this capability is out there for any malcontent, or worse terms, to get the technology and use it nefariously. So we should do as much as we can, but being aware that we're actually all, vulnerable to much worse actors on the outside. I just wanted to make that point because that's kind of where I was going with who else can have these type of machines. So, and that was just the only really different things that I had to say. So otherwise I'm aligned. I think we're reaching some consistency here, Mayor.
My biggest concern are the unknown unknowns. It's a new technology. being applied in a new way. Drones themselves aren't a new technology, but we are in that portion of the adoption curve right now where things are really happening fast. And in part, that's because, 20,000 drones a day are used in war zones, right? And so in that kind of an accelerated period of the adoption curve, it's almost impossible for us to know now what the problems are going to be. So what I look to my colleagues to get support for, and it sounds like everybody is thinking this way, is we have to come up with some additional manner of oversight, whether that's an ombudsman or whether that's a standing subcommittee on council or whatever the case may be. However we determine that we are going to go forward with that, we need to have some brain cells dedicated to making sure that we know the unknowns as soon as they're knowable and not find out about them by reading in the paper when something crappy has happened. So as long as we can be smart about, I don't want to implement it and forget it. I want to, have a constant review process, at least for the first, period of time. I would be in favor of program implementation for drone as a first responder, as long as that element of scrutiny is foremost. So I think you have your guidance, which is what you're looking for from us tonight, right? Do we need a vote on anything? No? Okay, good. All right. So next will be our information items, which we don't need to review. They were part of the packet. And then will be council and staff reports. So Councilmember Lang, kick us off.
Three things. First of all, the web for this meeting is greatly improved. All sorts of links, much easier to navigate than the full PDF. I'm sure there's more to be done, but I complain when I'm not happy. It's only right that I say good things when I am happy. And thanks to everybody who worked on that. And in all seriousness, I appreciate it. Clearly, a lot of work went into moving that forward. So thank you for that. I went to the Kiwanis, spoke to them about what's going on in the community, fielded their questions. A delight as always. I love doing those sorts of things. If anybody out there in video land wants a council member to come and chat with you, I'm willing to. I bet all the rest of us are as well. It's great to receive those invitations. A great way for us to learn, for me to learn anyway as well. Enjoyed that. The last thing I'll say actually is last week I had the opportunity to go to the Superior Court Legislators Day. One of the things I like about being a council member is you're invited to go find out about things. And I often say yes, because I'm a curious guy. It was a great program, particularly perhaps less for the lawyers on the thing, but for someone like me who I'm proud to say has not spent much time in courtrooms, it was very compelling. I particularly spent time in family court and mental health court and speaking with some of the judges about that, Q&A sessions, and then observing the court. And it was very helpful because, and the reason I chose that is those are places where incidents in our community or situations in our community are often going to flow into there. So having some idea where residents are going to end up, I came away with it with a really gratitude for the judges who do that work. It's hard work, mentally, but also emotionally, and a real appreciation for how much mental health issues are in our society, and something that certainly informed my thinking in the presentation we had earlier about drones and how they might be able to diffuse situations. Certainly would recommend it for anybody who thinks they would benefit, and on the record as being grateful to the people at the Superior Court who organized a very, very helpful day for me. Thank you.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have anything to report in terms of meetings that I've attended, but I do want to note that I see on the tentative calendar for October 14th, the council will be discussing an MOU for the Woodland Library patio expansion. I just want to put on the record and announce that I intend to recuse myself from that discussion because I own real property within 500 feet of that facility. I have a question for staff. Is there any anticipation that a federal shutdown is going to affect the city at all? And should we be on the lookout for the need for a special meeting or anything to address some urgencies that could be a result of a shutdown?
Financially, at this point, we're not anticipating any negative impacts. However, for anyone who's been following the news today, there have been lots of suggestions for changes that could be made to the federal workforce, including agencies that would support the city like FEMA. So we'll have to wait and see what actions are taken if a shutdown takes place.
Okay, thank you. I do have one proposal for a future agenda item, and it would have to be on October 14th. And Mayor, you may already be thinking about this, and if you are, I'll withdraw the request. But the week of October 19th is United Against Hate Week. Given the level of strife, I think, that we're seeing in the country, the political assassinations that we've seen over the past couple of months, I think that it would be meaningful for the council as a whole to adopt a resolution recognizing United Against Hate Week and supporting the values that it is designed to support and foster. I think it'd be very meaningful, and I would look to see if there were two or more other council members who would like to see the council adopt a resolution in that area.
May I just add on, the year I was mayor, I gave a proclamation for that week, so that's another thing. I'm not saying I wouldn't support a resolution. I would
No, and if the mayor
definitely-
plans to do that, then
Yeah,
I would
that's
withdraw
why,
it.
yeah,
That would be appropriate too. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
That's fine. I do not plan to do a proclamation. I actually there are 2 proclamations already that night.
Then I'd support the resolution then.
So I guess our guidance then is for staff to craft a resolution for us to approve that night?
Yes.
Okay. And that it should be consistent with whatever language is associated with the United Against Hate.
Yes,
Week.
they have.
Yeah,
Lang-
I'm sure
there's
they
a
have
lot.
canned language.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
all. So that's what the guidance is. Okay. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 things. One, I have office hours on Zoom on Friday, and I think it's posted on the city's website. And then the second item, congratulations to the city and Nick Zorns and the team on Los Altos becoming a pro-housing designated city. I hope I got that title right. It's a big accomplishment from the city, and so I just really want to recognize that. So congratulations. And on that point, I remember in the past, and I don't have the timeline in front of me, but we used to get updates on our progress with the housing element update and meeting the RENA goals. And I think it's actually, we have to report to the state. Is it annual? So I'm just curious, what's the status of that? When are we getting that report? What are things looking like?
So your next annual update would be in spring. So you'll get it within like the first 90 days of the calendar year. Officially, yes.
Great, thank you.
Mayor, I forgot.
Go ahead.
I have office hours on the 10th, so coming up a week from now.
In person.
Okay.
Yeah, in person. Yeah, sorry. Community center.
Anything else? So I had a meeting with the chancellor of the Foothill De Anza Community College District, and I've met with the president of Foothill College and brought a number of other people in, including Director Sohn from our transportation department, and Foothill has already purchased 2 vans or buses for circulator service, and because of their sustainability plan, they had to buy electrical vehicles, and they don't have any place to charge them, but we do. And we're talking about how we can work together to take that service and make it more than just something that connects Foothill and De Anza and their Sunnyvale Center, but also a service that connects downtown Los Altos with Foothill and De Anza and the Sunnyvale Center, and with the Caltrain station. So right now we're in sort of staff to staff discussions to bring enough details together, but hopefully to be able to bring that back to council to review as a possible joint venture or some other kind of project with the community college district. And with that, it is time to adjourn. However, tonight I am going to adjourn in honor of longtime Los Altos volunteer Pinky Whelan. She died at home on Orange Avenue yesterday at age 94. She was one of the pillars of early Los Altos, setting a path of community service for many to follow. She's lived in our community since 1967, very focused on local history, instrumental in the opening of the Los Altos History House in 1977, and just many other accomplishments. So I just want to put it on the record that we're adjourning in her honor tonight. And rest in peace, Pinky.